754. Jiang Shangzhen did not return to Yunding Peak directly to avoid disturbing Chen Pinggan and the other two from catching up. Instead, he stayed in Huangheji and secretly went to Snail Shell. He stayed in the Jiang family's private residence that was only used to entertain distinguished guests in the Blessed Land. The maids and servants in the residence were all fox-skinned beauties similar to the Shu family in Qingfeng City. Jiang Shangzhen took out a bunch of keys and opened the mountain and water restriction. After entering, he climbed up the railing and looked into the distance. The mystery of the Snail Shell residence was immediately revealed. The sea of clouds was surging, and only the residence under his feet was above the sea of clouds. It was like a lonely immortal island outside the sea of clouds. All the other residences were hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible. They were as small as mustard seeds floating in the water. Jiang Shangzhen held an old cattail leaf fan in one hand. The handle of the fan was covered with an old bamboo pipe from the green immortal mountain. He gently fanned the breeze. In his right hand, he held a half-moon teapot made from green taro paste. He slowly sipped his tea. His vision was wide and he could see the scenery around Huangheji at a glance. Jiang Shangzhen was waiting for an old friend to come and complain to him. However, the old man who was rowing the boat did not show up for a long time. He was very patient. Since he had nothing to do, he had to find something to do. Jiang Shangzhen muttered, "See no evil," as his vision wandered. He first found the residence where Huang Yiyun lived alone. He was worried that Huangheji did not treat Sister Yi well and neglected her. Jiang Shangzhen's original intention was to see what Sister Yi's residence was lacking so that he could get someone to prepare. However, he found that Sister Yi was practicing boxing in the courtyard with the Immortal's footwork diagram that was passed down from the ancestors of Mount Pu. Jiang Shangzhen stretched his neck and widened his eyes as if he wanted to stick his face on Huang Yiyun's fist. Huang Yiyun sensed it and frowned slightly. She extended her elbow and a majestic fist intent hung in the air like a white rainbow in the Snail Shell Mountain landscape secret realm. Jiang Shangzhen quickly covered his face with his cattail leaf fan. The cattail leaf fan smashed hard on his face. Jiang Shangzhen staggered back a few steps and waved his cattail leaf fan gently to disperse the long rainbow condensed by the fist intent. Martial artist of the end was so difficult to deal with. His divine sense was too sharp. Jiang Shangzhen hurriedly looked elsewhere. A rather famous fairy sister who was expected to be listed in this year's Flower God Mountain's new book was currently using the yellow crane base mirror, flower, and moon in water. She was painting in front of a painting table, drawing a picture of a court lady with fine brushstrokes. She was also using the magic of the mountain, causing mist and clouds to rise from her brush. She was talking about how she met Huang Yiyun of the Cattail Fan Cloud Cottage today and how she was lucky enough to have a small chat with Lord Yellow Mountain. For a moment, the spiritual energy in her mansion rippled. It was obvious that she had spent a lot of money. It seemed that in addition to spending money on a pile of snow, there was also a rich guest who had thrown a small sum of money. Jiang Shangzhen waved his palm leaf fan, wanting to disperse some of the smoke rising from the painting. This was because when the fairy bent down to paint, especially when she had one hand placed horizontally in front of her and two fingers holding the sleeve of the hand holding the brush, the scenery was the most beautiful. Jiang Shangzhen took a sip of tea and was full of admiration for this elder sister Wei. She was actually able to have a small chat with Huang Yiyun, the number 2 martial artist of the continent. It was almost the same treatment as him. She really dared to say it and some people really believed her. The female cultivator in the archive was named Wei Chengxian. She came from a southern celestial school, which used to have a very good relationship with Yuzhigang. Thinking of Yuzhigang, Jiang Shangzhen also felt a little helpless. It was a mess, and it ended up the same as the female cultivators of the unjust sentence sect in the past. The Shizhu water viewing platform and the Thunder Hall on the mountain were all gone just like that. Regarding the reconstruction of Yuzhigang and the unjust sentence sect, the continuation of the incense in the Hall of Ancestors, and the reconstruction of the archive, besides the endless disputes on the mountain, the academy was still fighting a war of words. Perhaps it was because Huang Yiyun's appearance in Huangheji was too rare and hard to come by, and there was also a disturbance on the mountain that almost provoked Huang Yiyun's fist. So, there were so many illusions everywhere in the House of Sea of Clouds, which made Jiang Shangzhen a little dizzy. In the end, he saw a chubby girl wearing a mountain robe made by the female cultivators in the peach and plum garden. The robe was brighter in color, but the quality was not high. It belonged to the kind of clothes that the female cultivators in the archive might not be able to afford, but it was the entrance dress of the fairies in the illusions. She lived alone in a mansion that required the least amount of fairy money. She activated the illusions in Huangheji and kept talking to herself. She stuttered and often had to stop talking. After a long time, she finally said something that she thought was humorous. However, it seemed that no one was watching the illusions at all. The chubby girl persisted for 2 hours, and her forehead was slightly sweaty. She was so nervous that she scared herself. In the end, she performed a blessing and quickly closed the illusions in Huangheji. She sat down on the stone bench in the small courtyard. She rubbed her hands together and secretly wiped the sweat off her palms. Then, she raised her hand and rubbed her forehead. She took out a small piece of paper from her sleeve. The paper was full of poems and sentences that she had copied. The little girl who was minding her own business carefully reviewed the illusions in Huangheji. Sometimes, she scratched her face, sometimes she was annoyed, and sometimes she was shy. In the end, she put away the paper and raised her fist to cheer herself up. In the end, the little girl was still a little discouraged. Her chubby face was pressed against the stone table. She frowned slightly and sighed softly. She probably felt that she was very ugly and that it was very, very difficult for her to earn money. The delicate little girl took out a few celestial items that could be used to watch other illusions. She gritted her teeth and chose a small and exquisite coral tree. Red light flowed around it, indicating that the illusions in Huangheji were being activated. She pursed her lips and carefully took out a piece of snow to spend money. She refined it into pure spiritual energy, and as if she was watering the coral tree, she slowly spread out a landscape painting scroll. It was the painting fairy who was temporarily her neighbor in the snail shell. The little girl took a deep breath and sat upright. She was completely focused and did not even blink. She carefully looked at the fairy's every word, every frown, and every smile. She spent a piece of snow to spend money. Earning money was not easy, but spending money was like running water. How could she not be serious? However, the more the little girl looked, the sadder she became because she felt that she would never be able to learn it in this lifetime. Jiang Shangzhen put away the teapot. He held his chin with one hand and gently shook the cattail leaf fan. He stared at the little girl from afar. The old suzerain of Jade Gui sect narrowed his red phoenix eyes and smiled gently. Old Wormwood Master Ni Yuanzan appeared outside the mansion. The door was not closed. He stepped in and came to Jiang Shangzhen's side. He smiled and said, "Master is still in the mood for leisure as usual." Jiang Shangzhen sipped the tea from the teapot and then joked, "Why did you provoke my good friend? The old man suddenly wants to know the taste of arsenic. Do you want to die? Or do you think your sword skills are invincible because you showed off Jiang Huai mosquito slaying sword? Great, now you don't even have a stalk of bamboo wormwood left. How can you be a ferryman in the future?" Ni Yuanzan said, "Back then, we had an agreement that I would only be an anonymous guest of the Cloud Cave Blessed Land, Huangheji. I would wait for the fated person to take away the ancient golden elixir. Other than that, I would do whatever I wanted. There were no restrictions on whether I could leave or stay." Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, "For so many years, relying on the three-legged golden toad on your shoulder, you helped my blessed land gather a lot of wealth. I have to thank you. However, you instigated me to bring the boat to the lotus flower blessed land. You said that you hoped to help him untie the knot in his heart, but in fact, you were scheming. Let's not talk about the original intention, just the result. You caused my good friend and I to be separated from each other. Now, we are even." Ni Yuanzan was like a celestial being who left a crane slough on the boat. He glanced at the river and the ferry port where there were no more ferry boats and sighed, "My body and mind have been in a cage for a long time. Now that I have returned to nature, I didn't expect that I would feel uncomfortable." Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "Now that the general trend of the world has risen, after you gave away the golden elixir, you didn't think of doing anything else? For example, meeting Sui Yu? Of course, those who left the lotus flower-blessed land were not only the 4 people in the picture scroll around Chen Pingan. The old Abbey Dean was one of the oldest cultivators in the world. Moreover, he was an unattainable 14th state. He could use the blessed land to seek the cave and exchange Taoist techniques with the Taoist ancestors. His Taoist techniques were still very high. Ni Yuanzhan asked, "Aren't you curious who I'm going to give the golden elixir to?" Jiang Shangzhen dismissed it with a smile and put away the half-moon-shaped teapot. Even though it looked unremarkable, if he could really kill the moon with a single willow leaf back then, the bright moon hanging high in the sky of the cloud cave blessed land would be the purest moon among the 10 big grotto heavens, 36 small grotto heavens, and 72 blessed lands. As for now, Jiang Shangzhen honestly did not want to go to Dali if he did not want to be the chief consecrator of the Luopa mountain. Kui Yu was now in Chen Pingan's hometown town. With a large amount of military achievements, not only was he recognized by the Central Region's Confucian Temple, but he was also qualified to establish a sect in the vast world. Since Ni Yuanzhan said so and was unwilling to give the precious golden elixir hidden in the yellow crane Ji to Kui Dongshan on the boat, it meant that Sui Yu, Ni Yuanzhan's favorite disciple in the lotus flower-blessed land, was indeed not a fated person. Jiang Shangzhen gently waved his palm leaf fan and said, "It's just an immortal weapon. It's not enough to make me curious. Only those who become golden elixir practitioners are of my generation." However, among the same golden elixir practitioners, the difference in the quality of their golden elixirs was like the difference between clouds and mud. Just like how there were millions of beautiful women in a continent, only 36 women could be ranked on the rouge painting and the divine flower mountain. Ni Yuanzhan took the initiative to reveal the secret of heaven and said, "Forming a tower with grass, observing the stars and qi, summoning a pavilion in the ancient land, deep and eternal." The Northern Golden Peak Temple's orthodoxy originated from the Taoist Pavilion sect. There were hundreds of magnificent mountains and rivers, but Zhongnan was the most famous. Zhongnan had thousands of peaks, and Pavilion sect was the most famous. Zhongnan was one of the 5 ancient peaks, and it was the most difficult to find. It was on par with the ancestral mountain of the 1000 Jade sect of the 3 mountains blessed land, Taishan. The ancient Pavilion sect was closely related to Zhongnan. The surname Shao was one of the few ancient surnames, along with Jiang Shangzhen's Jiang and the Jiang of the Aquarius continent's Yunlin Jiang clan. Jiang Shangzhen clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "Elder Du of the Golden Peak Temple is quite lucky to have Shao Yuanran as his disciple. Previously, I felt that this kid's luck was strange, but it was so good that it was not eye-catching. This is even rarer than being a young hero." Not only did he find a good master who was willing to nurture him wholeheartedly, he also found a hidden Taoist vein like the Golden Peak Temple. Finally, he was able to form a relationship with the Great Spring Dynasty's imperial throne, which was protected from the fall of the dynasty. He earned a lot from all these. Now, he is just sitting at home and waiting for Brother Ni to take the initiative to send him an opportunity. The immortal opportunities on the mountain are indeed wonderful, even I am envious. However, this is a great thing for Shao Yuanran, but it may not be the same for Brother Ni. He is involved in the muddy water and has no choice but to return to the cage. Ni Yuanzhan said, "I know you don't have a good impression of the Golden Peak Temple, so I won't ask for much. I only hope that Shao Yuanran can cultivate smoothly for 100 or 200 years. After that, when he enters the upper 5 realms, whether it is a blessing or a curse, it will be up to him. I won't make any promises." Jiang Shangzhen shook his head. "Brother Ni, you left the bamboo wormwood and crane cloak tonight. Sure enough, you didn't give him a gift for free. You have long seen the entanglement between my brother Cao Mo and the Golden Peak Temple. You reclusive experts like to do things like the grey line of grass snakes, which is annoying. A cultivator is riding a boat along the long river of time. Time passes by slowly, and everything is fine at first. Everyone minded their own business, but from time to time, they would see the same person at a ferry downstream. If it happened once or twice, it would be fine, but it happened 3 or 4 times without end. Not to mention Cao Mo, even someone as good-tempered as me would feel that it is unreasonable." Ni Yuanzhan's expression turned solemn, and he said in a low voice, "From what you mean, you want to stop me from sending out the golden core?" Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, "If Xiao Yuanran dares to come to Yellow Heji, I'll let him die in front of you. If you dare to send out the golden core to the Great Spring Dynasty, I'll let him have the chance to complete his Dao meaning with the golden core and become the legendary first-grade golden core, but he won't be able to break through to the nascent soul realm." Ni Yuanzhan sneered, "Do you think that just because the Eastern Sea Temple is no longer in the vast world, you can compete with the old temple master in terms of Dao techniques?" Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "We're separated by a world. Why should I be afraid?" Ni Yuanzhan said meaningfully, "Oh? Fellow Daoist Jew from the Spring Tide Palace, you're as heroic as ever." Jiang Shangzhen blinked and leaned against the railing. He leaned back and half of his face was covered by the cattail leaf fan. Could it be that the old temple master has graced the Cloud Cave blessed land with his presence? Ni Yuanzhan sneered. A willow leaf flashed, and a sharp swordlight pierced through the old temple master's head from between his eyebrows. Ni Yuanzhan reached out a finger to press between his eyebrows. He held onto the railing with one hand and said furiously, "Jiang Shangzhen, how dare you?" Jiang Shangzhen laughed, "Brother Ni, you're really inexperienced when it comes to pretending to be mysterious. If the old temple master really left a bit of his mind in the vast world, why would he waste it on someone like me, who's always kind and forgiving?" Ni Yuanzhan sighed and said with a gloomy expression, "I'll continue to stay in Yellow Heji and help you expand the fortune in the blessed land. As for the ownership of the golden core, we'll discuss it later." Jiang Shangzhen comforted him, "Brother Ni, you're a gentleman. Being schemed against by someone like me proves that you're a righteous person. Why should you be sad? You should be happy. What's so bad about the Cloud Cave blessed land? It's just a door away from the vast world. There are so many shrewd people who are even more despicable than Jiang Shangzhen. They can be seen everywhere on the streets. If it's not Han Yushu, it's Du Hanling, or Lu Ying. They're all experts in scheming against each other. Brother Ni, you'll be at a disadvantage easily if you work hard. In the end, it's better to be a fisherman on the river, singing by the lake, rowing a boat under the bright moon." Jiang Shangzhen nodded vigorously, "That's right. If you're living under someone else's roof, you should have the awareness of living under someone else's roof." "Oh right, I've seen a lot of new people and things tonight, and I've also thought of some old things. It's rare for me to have such a poetic mood. I've only managed to squeeze out 2 sentences after racking my brain." Ni Yuanzhan sneered, "I think it's better to forget about it. Master Jiang is so talented, I wouldn't dare to follow up. Wouldn't that make me a laughingstock?" Jiang Shangzhen laughed, "If I'm not wrong, Ni Yuanzhan, you've been hiding something. You didn't give the golden core to Sui Yuyu, but you secretly kept a good sword from the temple for your only disciple. I've said it before, there's no teacher in the world who doesn't consider the path of a direct disciple. You must know that when I went to the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, I wasted 60 years there because I wanted Lu Fang to be one of the top 10 in 60 years. Luckily, I got a good weapon from the old temple master." Jiang Shangzhen looked at the river and the moon and said, "Today, I want to borrow teacher's sword. When the sky is dark, the earth is dark." Ni Yuanzhan frowned and shook his head, "There's no such sword." "I'm not lying." Jiang Shangzhen glanced at Old Hao and said, "You're the sword." Ni Yuanzhan was angry, "Are you scolding me?" Jiang Shangzhen smiled, "Teacher Ni, there's no need for you to lose your composure on purpose and show weakness to me everywhere. I've carefully flipped through the various history books and secret records of the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land. Teacher Ni is proficient in the knowledge of the 3 schools of thought. Although you were limited by the quality of the blessed land back then and were unable to climb the mountain to cultivate, which led to your failure in ascension, you actually possessed a clear heart of belief. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been invited out of the blessed land by the old temple master. If Ding Ying was carefully nurtured by the old temple master using the martial madman Zhu Lian as a prototype, then Yu Zhani of the Lake and Mountain sect should be calling teacher Ni master from afar after several centuries." Ni Yuanzhan sighed, "Gone are all the winds." Jiang Shangzhen knew that he would not be able to come up with anything else with Ni Yuanzhan, so he continued to observe the mountains and rivers, looking at Wei Qiongxian's water mirror's image. With the abilities of immortals, he tossed a small coin into the snail shell estate without anyone noticing. He smiled. I'm Jiang Shangzhen of the Dragon Province. Wei Chongxian remained unmoved. She only continued to paint. A small coin was not enough to make a fairy who was likely to make it onto the painting of rouge make a fuss. All the Qi practitioners watching the water mirror's image heard what Jiang Shangzhen said. Very soon, a cultivator tossed in a coin as well, laughing loudly. I'm Jiang Shangzhen of the Scarlet Shirt Mountain. Another person tossed in a coin as well. I'm Jiang Shangzhen of Poyang. You fake Jiang Shangzhens, get out of Fairy Wei's water mirror's image. Currently, there were many water mirrors' image on the Tongya Province mountain with the suffix Jiang Shangzhen. At dawn, Chen Pinggan rested with his eyes closed on a small bamboo chair under the eaves. His hands were placed on top of each other with his palms facing upwards. He had only separated a fragment of his consciousness to immerse himself in the small world of the human body. Chen Pinggan smiled knowingly. For no reason, he thought of a paragraph in a scholar's notebook. It was about the description of a successful cultivator who visited immortals. It was made up purely from the imagination of a scholar. The golden core was sparkling and colorful. The cloud liquid sprinkled on the 6 bowels and the sweet dew moistened the bones. He felt that his body was as light as a swallow pecking on the fallen leaves. His skeleton felt as if it had fallen into the clouds and mist. His consciousness was like a bird flying between heaven and earth. The sound was endless. He felt as if he was about to soar to the heavens and cook for a long time. He suddenly came back to his senses and stepped on the ground. Only then did he know that there were immortals on the mountain and that there were spells in the human world. At the Taiping Mountain, the Fist of the 11th State seemed to have written a wordless fist manual. The manual was divided into 2 parts. One part was on the body of the immortal, Han Yushu, and the other part was embedded in Chen Pinggan's mountains and rivers. Previously, when he was sleeping soundly at the straw hut in the sea of bamboo, Chen Pinggan had been concentrating on studying the fist manual. The moves, momentum, and spirit were progressing layer by layer. From the fist theory to the fist technique, he did not miss anything and benefited greatly. The 10 realms of the martial way were indeed the limits. Vigorous Qi, pure Qi, and the 3 floors of Shendao were just 1 level apart. So half a fist of the 11th state was able to make Chen Pinggan, who was at the 10th state vigorous Qi, to only be able to parry and not retaliate. Chen Pinggan retracted his consciousness. It was as if he was returning home from a long journey. He slowly left the 10,000 miles of mountains and rivers in the human body. He said in his heart, "Awake." Kui Dongshan sat up. He rubbed his eyes and was a little dazed. He stretched his body and said, "Senior sister is still sleeping? Why is she like a child?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said softly, "She has been tense for too long. When she was crossing the river on the boat, she slept for a long time. The time was too short. It is still far from enough." Kui Dongshan laid on his side, "Teacher, this time on the way back to the Aquarius continent, and the future location of the Tongyi continent, there will be a lot of troubles. I will stand on the side of reason." Chen Pinggan lifted one leg and quietly placed it on the ground. He said slowly, "The world is still the same. Talking about reason makes people sick of it. What is the point of learning the sword and training in fist techniques? Naturally, it is to make people more patient. From not being willing to listen to a single word, to being willing to listen to a few sentences. From being willing to listen to a few complaints, to being willing to listen to everything from start to finish." Kui Dongshan wanted to say something but stopped. Chen Pinggan laughed. "There are differences between close and distant friends. It is human nature. It is unavoidable. I will control it well." Chen Pinggan stood up and started to walk in the 6 steps. His punches were extremely slow, causing Kui Dongshan to feel sleepy again. "I am not worried about that." Kui Dongshan shook his head. He was disheartened. "The old bastard is crazy. He placed me under house arrest in the Great Blasphemy Temple for many years. I tried my best to get out but could not. It was only at the end of last year that I received an edict from Lin Shuyi, who was in charge of the temple, that I was allowed to leave the temple. When I showed myself, I discovered that the old bastard was utterly vicious and merciless, even tricking me. So now, other than my cultivation level, I actually have nothing left. The Great Li Imperial Court doesn't seem to have a person like Kui Dongshan at all. I've lost all of my identity in the Great Li dynasty, whether in the open or in the dark. The old bastard deliberately made me go from an insider of the situation of a continent to a complete outsider at the final stage. Then, from half an outsider of Luorpa Mountain, I became a true insider. Mister, don't you think this guy has a screw loose? Chen Pinggan shook his head and said, it is for your own good, and also for Luopo Mountain. Otherwise, although you seem to have the upper hand in everything, in fact, you are involved with Dali everywhere. It will not be good. When the time comes, I will reason with Dali. Dali will talk to me about the incense, I will talk to Dali about right and wrong, and Dali will talk to me about the overall situation. That will be troublesome. Kui Dongshan said helplessly, I know the reason. Before I came to see you, I also comforted myself like this. But when you mentioned Han Yushu of the WN Yarrow sect, I began to be worried again. An immortal who was willing to sacrifice his ancestral foundation and decided to fight you to the death in exchange for credit, what does it mean? It means that there are at least 1 or 2 ascendant realm cultivators behind Han Yushu. I am afraid that even the Confucian temple in the central region can't get hold of their weakness. I can conclude that the old bastard was aware of this in the past few years, but he deliberately did not say anything to me. It's okay. We will settle this old score. Let's take it slow. We will unravel it bit by bit. There is no need to rush. Let's take it slow. Let's take it as an extremely dangerous puzzle. The reason why I had deliberately left the Clear Breeze City and the Upright Sun Mountain untouched was because I was worried about alerting the enemy too early. Otherwise, before the last long journey, with the Luopo Mountain's wealth at that time, I actually had the confidence to wrestle with the Clear Breeze City. Chen Pinggan casually stopped walking halfway and sat back on the bamboo chair. He raised his palm and tapped his fingers together. He smiled and said, from the natal porcelain of Liu Xianyang and me, to the real mastermind behind Zhengyang Mountain and Qingfeng City, to the unavoidable encounter with Han Yushu this time, and most likely the Battle of the 13 at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, these are all grievances that diverged from a certain vein. It's just that they come from different paths. In the beginning, they definitely didn't deliberately target me. An orphan from Mud Bottle Alley in Pearl Cave Heaven wouldn't be so important to them. But when I became a hidden official and returned to the vast world alive, they couldn't help but care less. Kui Dongshan looked at Pei Qian with a strange expression, as if he was hoping that senior sister would stir up the hornet's nest. Chen Pinggan asked in confusion, why? Liu Xianyang is already at odds with Windy City and Zhengyang Mountain? Kui Dongshan shook his head and said timidly, it was old chef who moved the entire Fox Nation to Lotus Root Blessed Land. Chen Pinggan was stunned for a long time. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said helplessly, Pei Xiong, the ruler of the Fox Nation, is in the nascent soul realm, right? Is she that gullible? What about the backup the Shu family of Windy City planted in the Fox Nation? Has the hidden danger been dealt with? Of course not. But old chef seems to be better at dealing with women than Brother Jiang. Kui Dongshan nodded vigorously. As for the hidden danger, it was indeed dealt with by old chef and me. Someone did something to Pei Xiong's soul. That person is very likely to be. At this point, Kui Dongshan's face turned pale and he was sweating. He reached out a finger to press between his eyebrows. Some thoughts. Sealing is like sealing a mountain. It is the most difficult to fight against oneself. Since you don't allow yourself to say it, then don't say it. Chen Pinggan reached out and patted the armrest of the recliner, indicating that Kui Dongshan should not put himself in danger. He said with a smile, I have some guesses about the person behind this. He is most likely similar to Han Yushu in terms of background and methods. He likes to secretly control the situation of a continent. The flow of sword qi in the Aquarius continent is very strange. From Li Tuanjing in the Wind Thunder Garden to Wei Jin in the Wind Snow Temple, Liu Baqiao, and of course, Liu Xianyang and I, obviously, someone did something to us. My relationship with He Xiaoyong from the Qingliang sect in the early years was like a marriage book being checked by Yu Lao. I secretly tied a red string for him. So this matter is not difficult to guess. Of the 7 ancestral blade strengthening gourds, 2 of them are in the small Aquarius continent. Isn't it strange? And the gourd that Su Jiao from the Zhengyang mountain has a mysterious origin. I only need to follow this clue and go to the ancestral hall of the Zhengyang mountain as a guest. I will be able to get close to the truth by flipping through a few pages of the old almanac. The only thing I am worried about now is that the person has quietly left the mountain to wander other continents before Liu Xianyang and I went to Qsword sect. Kui Dongshan gritted his teeth and bent 2 fingers. He wanted to cut out a thought that was locked by himself and Kui Dong from his divine soul. Chen Pinggan put 2 fingers together and gently tapped the armrest of the recliner. He interrupted Kui Dongshan's dangerous action with his fist intent. He then waved his sleeve and Kui Dongshan immediately fell back and leaned against the chair. Chen Pinggan laughed, "I just don't have a ruler." Kui Dongshan spat out a mouthful of turbid air, "I am useless." Chen Pinggan said, "Do you know what I admire the most about Master Wan? It is that when Master Wan takes in disciples, he values their temperament. He also thinks that when taking in disciples, it is the master passing down the Tao to the disciple. The disciple can practice the sword in peace and not quarrel with others for the sake of a sect or fight in groups. I feel that Master Wan is most worthy of admiration for this point. The master leads the way and the cultivation is up to the individual. The disciples who enter the sect to cultivate do not completely disregard the reputation of the ancestral hall. They do not need to care about the master and disciple status. In the end, cultivation is still human. On Luopo Mountain, I do not feel that Pei Qian has to be like anyone. He does not have to be like me. Luopo Mountain does not need everyone to be like me or Pei Qian. On this point, you have already said it very clearly back then. All right, tell me something that makes me happy. Kui Dongshan turned sideways, his palms pressed against his cheeks. His whole body curled up, his attitude lazy. He laughed and said, "Mister, now Lotus Root Blessed Land is already at the bottleneck of a superior blessed land. The wealth is rolling in and the benefits are great. Although it is far from being comparable to Cloud Cave Blessed Land, but compared to the other superior blessed lands of the 72 blessed lands, it is definitely not at the bottom. As for all the intermediate blessed lands, even if they have been managed by the Zong family for hundreds or thousands of years, they still cannot be compared to Lotus Root Blessed Land." Chen Pinggan, on the other hand, didn't feel too happy. Instead, he felt a little uneasy. Kui Dongshan was very considerate and quickly handed over an account book written by Wei Wenlong. "This is an old account book that I got before I was locked up in the temple." After Chen Pinggan read through the history of how Lotus Root Blessed Land became a high-grade blessed land, he heaved a sigh of relief. It was the right time, right place, and right people. It was just that he would inevitably owe a lot of favors. No matter, the favors on the mountain were not the same as below the mountain. There was no need to fuss over the passing of 10 to 20 years. Inside the blessed land, there were mountain and mountain deities, ghost fox immortal monsters, flower demons, wood demons, heaven and earth treasures, martial and civil luck, immortal opportunities, all of them appeared one after another. Chen Pinggan's eyes lit up, he carefully flipped through the account book and asked, "Great blasphemy? Dali wanted to transform GQ into a dragon?" Kui Dongshan said softly, "The great blasphemy that runs through the center of the Aquarius continent is called Chidu." Chen Pinggan stopped flipping through the book and nodded his head. His expression was calm as he continued flipping through the book. His tone did not fluctuate much. "I remember that year, Li Huai and the rest all obtained a copybook. If not, I would not have broken the contract with GQ so decisively at the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In order to break the contract, the price was not small." Kui Dongshan felt that it was a pity. If Mr. did not break the contract, you would be able to obtain an endless supply of water luck, and for the next 100 or 1,000 years, you would be able to stay on Luopo Mountain, like a fisherman sitting on a fishing platform, and reaping the benefits every day. Even if GQ was not willing, she would have to give it to you. Chen Pinggan did not mind, and joked, "Logically speaking, Being a good person actually requires people to pay an additional price. When I first found out about this, I found it hard to accept. But after experiencing many things, I truly thought it through and accepted it wholeheartedly, and it became easier for me to let go of the worries in my heart. It is because it is hard to reason with people, and it is not easy to be a good person, that is why it is so valuable. Kui Dongshan muttered, everything under the heavens is about gains and losses, and then there is initiative and passivity, that is the way of the world and the human heart. Chen Pinggan nodded his head, that makes sense. Na Lan Yuji and Yaro Xiao Yang walked out of the house and came over. Chen Pinggan extended his finger to his mouth, indicating for them not to speak loudly. Pei Qian was still sleeping soundly. Na Lan Yuji spoke in his mind, Master Cao, are we going to Inkstone Mountain today? If you have matters to attend to, we can go tomorrow morning. Chen Pinggan nodded his head, we are going, before we move out, I will inform you. Na Lan Yuji brought Yaro Xiao Yang and left, and went to admire the pile of inkstones. Chen Pinggan looked at the small mountain of stones, and was quiet for a moment. He hesitated for a moment, then asked in his mind, do you know of a lady called Kui Yu? I heard that she is currently in our Aquarius continent. Kui Dongshan nodded his head, I know of her, she has a good relationship with Xiao Mai Li. Mister, why are you asking this, do you know her? Chen Pinggan shook his head, I don't know her. Kui Dongshan was just about to say a few more words when Chen Pinggan smiled and said, remember to remind me often in the future. When I'm chatting with my own people and sparring with others, I must say less strange and shocking things. Luo Po Mountain has been led astray by you and Pei Qian. The only good thing about it is that it has caused me to reject any compliments from other people. Previously, when Huang Yiyun was at Huang Hedge's side, she had the posture of a Wenquan fist. Huang Yiyun herself was fine, but she had her own reasons for using the Wenquan fist. Chen Pinggan still had a good impression of Huang Yiyun and Pu Mountain Cloud Grass Hall. A pure martial artist who could peacefully train his own martial Dao, was willing to do something for the mountains and rivers of a continent, to the extent that he was willing to stake the honor and disgrace of Pu Mountain. That was definitely something. In truth, the reason why Chen Pinggan was not willing to accept the fist, was because even Jiang Shangzhen had not guessed the reason. The ladies of the Great Wall of Sword Qi had many heroes. Tongyi Continent's martial artist, Huang Yiyun, as well as Liu Xia Continent's female immortal, Song Li, whom he had met on the sea previously, all made Chen Pinggan feel as if he had returned to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. However, the spectators who had walked out of the snail shell mansion all had burning gazes, full of anticipation. The only thing that all the spectators cared about was the result of the Wenquan fist, who won, who lost, and who was alive. It was not as simple as the spectators wanting to join in the fun, but the Wenquan fist could injure and even kill people. Especially when Huang Yiyun made a move, it seemed to become a matter that was not worth asking why. It was a matter of course, a matter of heaven and earth. Yes, what Mr. said is extremely true. The Wenquan fist is terrifyingly profound, even more profound than the martial artist's realm. Seeing that the situation was not good, Kui Dongshan hurriedly changed the topic. Just like Yu Panshui, that bad chess player, when he played chess with others, the spectators would cheer and clap their hands vigorously. The most frightening thing was those spectators, who really thought that old Yu, who constantly made muddle-headed moves on the chessboard, had made some amazing moves. Old Yu was still all right, he knew how much he was worth. However, in the ways of the world, how many people are only good at one skill? Over time, they really mistakenly thought that they had mastered all their skills, that they were successful in cultivation. After not seeing each other for a few days, they became a national master in chess. After another few days, there was another master of painting. When they went to the foot of the mountain and casually said a few words, they became a master of maneuvering and maneuvering, a master of witty conversation. Casually saying a joke that was not funny would win the cheers of the entire hall, and everyone at the table would laugh there. Chen Pinggan turned his head, smiled and did not speak. The change in topic was a bit stiff. Kui Dongshan complained, eldest senior sister, that's not very kind. Pei Qian had actually already woken up, but she was still pretending to be asleep. Kui Dongshan did not give up and said, senior sister, wake up. According to the agreement, You have to help the Jade Archive divide the small mountain of inkstones into 3, 6, and 9 grades. Pei Qian could only open her eyes and yawn, but she still lay motionless. Jiang Shangzhen came. Pei Qian stood up and walked over to Naylan's Jade Archive, helping to divide the pile of stones. Chen Pinggan planned to make a trip to Mount Larojun today. As for the Inkstone Mountain of the Crown Prince, of course, he would not miss it. Jiang Shangzhen entered the place, carrying a bamboo yellow brush holder in his hand. Kui Dongshan's eyes lit up, generous, as expected of the righteous brother Ju. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "Let's discuss with the Mountain Lord, don't go to Inkstone Mountain." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Why not? I didn't ask the Blessed Land to make an exception for me. I'm just going up and down the mountain according to the rules." Jiang Shangzhen raised the bamboo carving brush holder in his hand and said seriously, "Business is business. For this transaction, the Blessed Land will obviously lose a lot of money. I can't stand it." Chen Pinggan was earning money from the Cloud Cave Blessed Land. Jiang Shangzhen really felt bad inside. Naylan's Jade Archive was that little girl's Fengsuan item. It was still fine, but what about Pei Qian? Brother Kui? Young Mountain Lord? Who didn't have something close at hand? What's more, could those few old pits withstand the three's overturning? As long as these people climbed up Inkstone Mountain, with Chen Pinggan's temper, he would really take away half of Inkstone Mountain's fine stones and materials. And he wouldn't even blink an eye. But Jiang Shangzhen was happy to spend his own money. Although giving away this bamboo yellow brush holder was equivalent to a mountain water secret realm, Jiang Shangzhen would only lose more money than the Blessed Land's Inkstone Mountain, but these were two different things. It was the mountain water secret realm where Chen Pinggan was recuperating. Chen Pinggan accepted it with a smile and kept the brush holder in his sleeve. To be the chief consecrator, how could he not have some sincerity? In the Jise Peak's ancestral hall meeting, he had to stand his ground. This thatched cottage concealed the mountain water secret realm in the sea of bamboo. The scenery was beautiful. Chen Pinggan had some selfish motives. He planned to ask Wei Pai to help connect the mountain routes after returning to Luopa Mountain. Connecting the water, he would use it as a place to cultivate in seclusion. For the first time, Bai Xian said that he wanted to practice his sword diligently. In the end, only Naylan Yuji, Yarou Shaoyan, and Cheng Chaolu followed Chen Pinggan to Mount Larojun. Jiang Shangzhen agreed to let the three children continue to try their luck at Inkstone Mountain. The group left Yunming Peak and went to Mount Larojun. They walked into the myriad miles of mountains and rivers painting. Pei Qian said that he wanted to go with Naylan Yuji. Chen Pinggan nodded and agreed. Although there wouldn't be any accidents in this Cloud Cave Blessed Land, with Pei Qian by the children's side. Thinking of this, Chen Pinggan was in a daze. Since when could Pei Qian protect others? When did Pei Qian not become a child? Therefore, Chen Pinggan couldn't help but look at the back of the first disciple and say something unnecessary. "You have to be careful. If you encounter any problems, look for Master." Pei Qian turned his head, grinned, and made a gesture of gently patting his forehead. In the myriad miles of mountains and rivers painting at the peak of Mount Larojun, there were hundreds of scenic places. Chen Pinggan didn't hesitate to spend half a day to travel from the southernmost Yuzhou to the north. He walked through them one by one and visited them. During this time, Chen Pinggan visited the Great Spring Mirage City that he had never really set foot in the past. Of course, he also visited the Heavenly Fault Peak and the Golden Peak Monastery of the northern sects. Especially the Golden Peak Monastery, Chen Pinggan almost didn't shrink the mountains and rivers. He walked extremely slowly. In the end, he returned to a place for the first time. Standing on a mountain belonging to the Golden Peak Monastery of the Alliance of Peach Leaves, Chen Pinggan didn't move anymore. He took out a jade archive unique to Mount Larojun that was issued by the Cloud Cave Jiang clan. He circulated a trace of spiritual qi and poured the names of the places carved on the jade archive. Finally, more than 10 immortal mountains in the mountain and river painting suddenly enlarged and rose from the ground. Chen Pinggan held the jade archive in his hand. On the ground, more than 10 places with good feng shui rose one by one. Looking around, He finally withdrew a part of the spiritual chi and shrank half of the mountain's scenery back into the painting. Chen Pinggan pressed his palm against the narrow saber and gently tapped the hilt of the saber. He fell into deep thought. The Summer Palace had a rich collection of books. Back then, Chen Pinggan was alone and spent a lot of effort to classify all the secret books. Among them, Chen Pinggan carefully read the 24 volumes of the Cloud Book of 7 lots. Among them, there was also the department of sun, moon, and stars. Besides the Big Dipper, there were also the auxiliary star and the prime star. In the vast world, the spirits of mountains and lakes mostly worshipped the moon to refine their forms. There were also cultivators who were good at guiding the stars to refine their chi mansion. However, in the past 10,000 years, the Big Dipper gradually showed a strange pattern of 7 showing and 2 hiding. Chen Pinggan flipped through the old almanac and knew the truth. It was the Sage of Rites who took a group of scholars to accompany the sages and the great cultivators on the mountain peak to travel far away from the sky. They took the initiative to search for the remnants of the gods. The lineage of the quasi-sage suffered a great loss. The Grand Heavenly Master of Dragon Tiger Mountain also fell in the sky. The reason why the auxiliary star and the prime star were mysteriously hidden was that they were once one of the battlefields of the great cultivators and the ancient gods. Kui Dongshan squatted beside Chen Pinggan's feet. The white-clothed youth was like a big white cloud that landed on the mountain peak to rest. This old Abbot Du, who I've heard of for a long time but never seen in person, is full of immortal aura. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "The reason why little Longqiu didn't participate in the Alliance of Peach Leaves is to deduce the remnant Taoist rhyme of the ancient mirror and refine the bright moon mirror. It's both a real benefit and a smokescreen at the same time. Little Longqiu may have secretly contacted the Golden Peak Temple. Once little Longqiu successfully occupies Taiping Mountain and forms a mountain alliance with the Golden Peak Temple, she can obtain a certain promise and secretly seize a sum of benefits. The Golden Peak Temple will be the most profitable one. As long as this protective mountain formation is formed, it will cover half of the Tongyi continent. It's enough to be comparable to the mountain formation of Jade Gui sect, right? That's more or less the truth." Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, "If Taiping Mountain and the Heavenly Fault Peak are not included and replaced with the other 2 mountains, it can only be considered ordinary. Even if it forms the celestial phenomenon of the Big Dipper, it's still a little lacking. After all, there's only one Golden Peak Temple and its foundation is not strong enough. It's already very shocking. Du Hanling is a nascent soul cultivator and a sect candidate of the Golden Peak Temple. He dares to think and do it, he's very impressive." Chen Pinggan clicked his tongue and said, "Du Hanling is indeed the mountain monarch of your Tongyi continent. He's a hero in a chaotic world and can protect himself. He's also a hero in a peaceful world and can take advantage of the situation to rise. Taoist Baozhen and Xiao Yuanran are so lucky to have such a good abbot." Jiang Shangzhen sighed. "Great minds think alike, Hillmaster." Kui Dongshan rolled his eyes. Chen Pinggan said slowly, "Taiping Mountain, the Golden Peak Temple and little Longqiu can forget about them. As for the Green Tiger Palace of the Heavenly Fault Peak, will old immortal Lu take advantage of the situation and change to a bigger mountain?" Jiang Shangzhen laughed and said, "Lu Yong is an old friend of ours. He's a nostalgic person and is one of the few old immortals who can be considered to have returned home in glory from another continent. In the Aquarius continent, he has the support of the Dali cavalry and the vassal King Song Mu. It's unlikely that he will ally with the Golden Peak Temple." Chen Pinggan covered his sleeves with both hands and squinted his eyes. "The pivot is the heaven, the jade is the earth, the G is the person, and the power is the time. Among them, the heavenly power is the darkest. Wen Chu is the connection between the body and the handle." Jiang Shangzhen laughed and asked, "Does Abbot have a grudge with the Golden Peak Temple?" Chen Pinggan's thoughts jumped and he asked, "There's a county in the Great Quan dynasty called the Riding Crane City. It's said that in ancient times, there were immortals who rode cranes and ascended. It's actually just a small mountain and the land around it is expensive. Does it have anything to do with old Mr. Ni? In the past, in the Riding Crane City, there was a youth who borrowed a knife from the martial temple. Of course, There was also a local lord who understood the ways of the world. At that time, Chen Pinggan wanted to give him a small sum of money as a reward, but the old mister did not accept it. As for Du Hanling's direct disciple, Daoist Baozhen Yin Miaofeng, and his grand disciple Xiao Yuan Ran, Chen Pinggan was not unfamiliar with the master and disciple who were consecrators of the Great Quan dynasty. The master and disciple were once responsible for helping the Liu dynasty's emperor to monitor the Yarrow family's border army. However, Chen Pinggan did not know that Daoist Baozhen had resigned from his position a few years ago and was cultivating in seclusion in the Golden Peak Temple. He was still unable to break through the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm. However, his disciple Xiao Yuan Ran was already the top consecrator of the Great Quan dynasty and was a young gold core earth immortal. Jiang Shangzhen clapped his hands and laughed. "Abbot, you can even guess this. It was indeed that teacher Ni of the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land who had ascended to the vast world that created the immortal ruins that were talked about by later generations." Chen Pinggan said, "Back then, when we were surrounded and killed in the Great Quan dynasty, I always felt that something was wrong after that. I suspect that the Golden Peak Temple was actually involved, but for some reason, they did not show up." Connecting to the current situation of the Tongyi continent, after a great battle, Du Hanling was actually able to carefully select 7 mountains to build a great formation. I even suspect that this old temple master colluded with the military camp of the savage world back then. Jiang Shangzhen said, "Of course you can guess like that, but there is no evidence, not even the slightest clue." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Don't worry, I am not stupid. I will not become enemies with half of the cultivators of the Tongyi continent just because of a Du Hanling that I have never met." The current Du Hanling's realm was not high, but he was the favorite of the cultivators of the Tongyi continent. Becoming enemies with the Golden Peak Temple was equivalent to becoming enemies with the entire Peachleaf Alliance. Chen Pinggan asked, "Do you have a copy of this mountain river diagram? I need to look at it more. The location of the next sect is very important." He believed that Jiang Shangzhen had already guessed his thoughts. Moreover, there was nothing to hide from this sect's consecrator. Perhaps Yi Yunyun's appearance in Yellow Heji was all intentional by Jiang Shangzhen to build a bridge between Luopa Mountain and Piyu Mountain. Jiang Shangzhen said, "If there is a copy of the mountain river diagram, it will be more taboo. However, I can get someone to make a copy." Chen Pinggan swallowed his words back into his stomach. He originally wanted to say that he could pay for it. The group left the boundary of the Larujun Mountain and rode the wind to the Yang Mountain that was dozens of miles away. Chen Pinggan kept his promise and did not go up the mountain to plunder. He only waited patiently at the foot of the mountain. Kui Dongshan received his teacher's heartfelt reminder and suddenly said loudly, "Teacher, a girl named Jiayue is now living in the blacksmith shop by the Dragon Whisker River. She seems to have a good relationship with Liu Xianyang." Chen Pinggan turned his head and looked at Jiang Shangzhen. Chen Pinggan originally thought that Jiayue had only gone to the vicinity of his hometown. He really did not expect it to be such a field. With Liu Xianyang's character, regardless of whether it had anything to do with Jiayue or not, when he returned to Luopa Mountain, would he feel good? Jiang Shangzhen pretended to be stupid. He waved his hand and said, "Go up the mountain. I know of 2 old pits that contain extremely beautiful ink stones." Chen Pinggan stretched out his hand. Jiang Shangzhen asked doubtfully, "Mountain Master, what are you doing?" Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "I want to borrow a few things from you." Jiang Shangzhen accepted his fate and began to check his sleeves. He did not expect Chen Pinggan to suddenly say, "East Mountain, isolate the world." Kui Dongshan immediately used his flying sword to draw a golden lightning pool. Chen Pinggan threw out the immortal's skin of Han Yushu from his sleeve. Jiang Shangzhen laughed loudly and kept it in his sleeve. It was an item that was close to him. In the future, when he roamed the Jianghu, he would have another excellent skin bag. Chen Pinggan reminded him, "When you feel that the time is right, appear as Han Yushu once. Also, it must be within the blessed enclave. Do not appear in the vast world." As time passes, the ancestral hall of the WN Yarrow sect and Han Yushu will definitely become suspicious. Let me say this first. This matter is extremely risky. Take it that I owe you a favor. As for this immortal's skin and the other half of the fist manual, just take it as payment. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, I know what to do. In the end, Chen Pinggan did not climb up the inkstone mountain. Pei Qian and the others went down the mountain and returned with a full load. Nalan Yuji jumped down the mountain. When she reached the mountain gate, she deliberately complained, why is Sister Pei so poor? She doesn't even have anything to protect her. Pei Qian smiled and nodded. Jiang Shangzhen was enlightened. Chen Pinggan rubbed his eyebrows. The little girl was too superfluous. Her Jianghu experience was still too little. They returned to the Yunming Peak together. Jiang Shangzhen left and asked someone to copy the mountain river painting. Kui Dongshan followed to join in the fun. Chen Pinggan looked at the bigger inkstone mountain on the ground and was speechless. Bai Xian saw that Kui Dongshan was gone and immediately put his hands behind his back. He swaggered out of the house and stood beside Chen Pinggan. Diligent sword practice? With my aptitude and comprehension, do I need to do that? Chen Pinggan called Cheng Chaolu and waved to Pei Qian, come and help him? Pei Qian scratched his head, Master should do it. I don't know how to teach fist. Chen Pinggan smiled and called Bai Xian. He took Cheng Chaolu to an open space and said directly, if you want to learn fist, you have to learn listening fist. Bai Xian grunted and nodded. Not bad. Master Cao is indeed knowledgeable. Little chef, you have to listen carefully. Pei Qian, who was busy separating the inkstone mountain, turned his head and looked at Bai Xian. Bai Xian noticed Pei Qian's gaze and asked doubtfully, Sister Pei, what are you doing? Pei Qian smiled slightly. Bai Xian, who still didn't know the importance of this matter, smiled at Pei Qian. Chen Pinggan continued, whether you can practice martial arts or not depends on whether you have fist intent. What did it mean to possess the fist intent? In fact, it was not illusory. It was nothing more than the word memory. People's blood, flesh, tendons, bones, and meridians all have memory. If you want to learn fist, you have to be able to withstand a beating. Otherwise, no matter how many moves you have, they are all just paper. So the worst thing when you practice fist is not remembering the beating. Nalan, you didn't have time to choose the inkstone. She quickly took out a pen and paper and began to copy. Pei Qian touched the little girl's head. Chen Pinggan turned to look at Bai Xian, I will suppress. You only need to use your flying sword. Don't be afraid of hurting people. Bai Xian originally wanted to say that he was afraid of killing people with one blow. However, when he saw Master Cao's smiling eyes, he immediately swallowed his words and obediently swallowed them back down. Chen Pinggan moved his head and Bai Xian's flying sword swept past. Bai Xian's flying sword made a big arc and stabbed at Chen Pinggan's forehead. Chen Pinggan didn't move this time. Bai Xian frowned, how do you know I will stop the flying sword? Besides, aren't you afraid I will change my mind? Chen Pinggan stretched out a finger and gently pushed aside the flying sword in front of him. He pointed at Bai Xian and then said to Cheng Chaolu, the first level of listening to a fist is to determine the origin, weight, and power of the fist. The second level is to observe the person. Look at the person's arm, shoulder, stance, fist intent, eyes, face, and even his thoughts. The third level is to accurately calculate the timing, location, and people. You have to listen carefully. The little fatty said softly to Bai Xian, even if you changed your mind, Master Cao would know. But Master Cao didn't move because he knew you didn't change your mind. Chen Pinggan smiled, that's right. Bai Xian sneered and walked slowly with his hands behind his back. He copied Chen Pinggan's words and said, by the same logic, learning martial arts and fighting with your life on the line is the same. Then it is the same in a battle with a sword. You can't just focus on the opponent's fists, legs, or flying sword. You have to divide your thoughts and fight in pairs to win. This is an extremely complicated chess game. You have to determine the opponent's background, skills, techniques, robes, offensive and defensive talismans, the level of your realm, the amount of spiritual qi, whether you cultivate unorthodox methods, whether you have used your trump cards, whether you have used them all or not, etc. These are all knowledge that needs to be carefully pondered. You have to think quickly and must be faster than your fists and swords. In the end, it is to let martial artists and sword cultivators reach the state of being able to predict the future. Cheng Chaolu listened in a daze. Chen Pinggan reached out and patted Bai Xian's head, praising, "Not bad, you really have the ability to comprehend. You are much stronger than when I first learned the fist." Bai Xian waved his hand, "Average, not worth mentioning." Pei Qian smiled, "It's a pity that you don't learn the fist." Bai Xian smiled and cupped his fists, "If there is a chance, I would like to learn from Sister Pei." Pei Qian smiled and nodded, "Sure, sure." Chen Pinggan did not stop Bai Xian. He kept jumping and leaving his name on a certain account book. He estimated that when Bai Xian came to Luopa Mountain, he would gradually understand how heroic he was now. Chen Pinggan let Cheng Chaolu walk back and forth and pointed out some details of the fist stance. Cheng Chaolu was actually not slow in learning the fist. Chen Pinggan let the little fatty continue to walk and went to the bamboo chair to lie down and rest. Pei Qian sat on a small bamboo chair and wanted to say something but stopped. Chen Pinggan smiled and asked, "What's the matter?" Pei Qian's eyes were dark and unclear. He lowered his head and said, "I saw a replica of the Beko Keikyang building." Chen Pinggan was puzzled. Then? Pei Qian clenched his fists, "Listen to Master, I can't look at other people's state of mind. So I only saw the state of mind of the people close to me at most once. I also only saw the old chef's state of mind once. For example, Kui Dongshan's state of mind was a deep pool with golden books scattered on the shore. For example, the old chef Zhu Lian's bloody storm, only a tall building stood tall with people leaning against the railing. When Zhu Lian returned to his hometown, he once smiled and said to Pei Xiong, "Who can tell me whether the world is real or not?" He once sighed, "Waking up from a dream is like jumping off a cliff." The noble young master Zhu Lian, in fact, when he first traveled in Jianghu outside the village's hotel, he saw a roadside dog and couldn't let it go in this life. It was like he didn't know he was a guest in a dream. The water flowed and the flowers flowed. Chen Pinggan didn't know these things. Pei Qian didn't know either. Pei Qian only saw the replica of the Dali dynasty's Beko Keikyang building and couldn't feel at ease. Chen Pinggan thought for a while and folded his hands in his sleeves. He looked up at the sky with a calm expression and said softly, "You have to believe in the old chef." "I will believe in Zhu Lian." Pei Qian was relieved, "I believe in Master." Chen Pinggan nodded, "Let's go home." 7:55. Before leaving the Cloud Cave blessed land, Chen Pinggan brought Pei Qian to Huang Heji and took the initiative to visit Yi Yunyun. Chen Pinggan put on the skin of a middle-aged man with a jade hairpin on his head. He wore a green robe and kept his saber and blade strengthening gourd. There was only a fasting tablet hanging on his waist. Pei Qian wore a clean and neat black robe. It was actually a daoist robe that was used to slightly conceal his fist intent. She tied her ponytail into a bun, revealing her high forehead. It was very refreshing. Kui Dongshan followed Jiang Shangzhen to stroll around. It was unknown where he was busy with something, so Chen Pinggan did not call him. With the fasting tablet hanging on his waist, he ignored the restriction of the mountains and rivers. He used his mind to inspect the surrounding cultivators in a tall building. After confirming that the tablet was correct, he did not continue to look at the two people. Chen Pinggan brought Pei Qian to Huang Heji, where the snail shell was used as a training ground. The wide streets and continuous tall mansions made Chen Pinggan absent-minded for a moment. After finding Yi Yunyun's residence, Chen Pinggan picked up the beast mask ring and lightly knocked 3 times. A talisman beauty with graceful features and clear eyes opened the door. She curtsied to the 2 guests and said softly, "Immortal masters, please follow me." She received Yi Yunyun's instructions and led the master and disciple through the corridors and aisles. Every step they took, they changed the scenery. In addition to the beautiful scenery, they were actually immortal money. In the big and small mansions of Huang Heji, there were more than 300 talisman puppet beauties. They all came from Yuji Gang. It was said that Yuji Gang had once made a lot of money from this business. Yuji Gang had encountered that disaster and had completely cut off the family line. Therefore, the secret talisman beauties of Yuji Gang's Shui Pavilion were lost. The fox skin beauties of the Shu family of the Aquarius continent's Qingfeng City also seemed to have disappeared inexplicably. Qingfeng City was announced to the outside world as the Fox Country and needed to be sealed for 100 years. This caused many immortal sects to feel pity, especially the mountain forces of the Aquarius continent that were proficient in the way of merchants. Otherwise, they would have sold it to the Tongyi continent at a high price and made a huge profit. Pei Qian frowned slightly and sent a telepathic message. Master, Huang Yiyun is putting on airs. If it was his own Luo Po mountain, he would never treat a guest so half-heartedly. Chen Pinggan joked, I think you're quite arrogant. Pei Qian said gloomily, if I knock on the door alone, it doesn't matter if you don't open the door. However, since Master had personally come, Yi Yunyun should at least show her face. As a martial artist of the limitless realm, you are really narrow-minded. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, when you're outside, the sky is high and the earth is wide. Don't think too highly of yourself. Pei Qian stood up for her master and ended up being reprimanded. She was actually quite happy. The talisman beauty brought the master and disciple to a quiet courtyard. Inside the moon cave, the shadows of bamboos danced. She smiled and said, we're here. Chen Pinggan thanked her and tore off his mask to show his real face. After walking through the bamboo forest path, their vision suddenly opened up. There was a building with 9 rooms, covered with dark green glazed tiles. However, it couldn't be compared to the glazed tiles that Chen Pinggan picked up in the North Continent. Later in the small paradise of the Dragon Palace, Chen Pinggan used those glazed tiles to make a deal with Fire Dragon Zhenren. He gave a 50% discount and it seemed that Fire Dragon Zhenren wanted to sell it to the White Emperor City's glazed pavilion. Therefore, it was said that the fate of the elders did not fall from the sky. The courtyard was huge and could be used as a martial arts practice field. Xue Huai was sparring with Guo Baimu. Xue Huai was in the far travel state, so he suppressed his state. Guo Baimu was in his 20s and had just entered the golden body state. However, he had entered the 6th and 7th realms as the strongest. Therefore, there was no bullying between the two of them. Yi Yunyun stood under the eaves and was guiding the two of them. Yi Xuanji, a young female cultivator from the Yi clan of Mount Pu, stood at the side. She wore a dragon fairy dress and a pearl on her wrist made from a string of pearls from the Luxure pit. No wonder Jiang Shangzhen had a good relationship with the cloud cottage of Mount Pu. Chen Pinggan stopped at the entrance of the courtyard and cupped his fists in greeting. Yi Yunyun cupped her fists in return. Chen Pinggan did not go around the two people who were practicing martial arts in the courtyard and went under the eaves. Instead, he stopped and gently extended his palm after he withdrew his fist, indicating for Yi Yunyun to continue teaching the two juniors. Yi Yunyun nodded and did not stand on ceremony with Cao Mo. As for whether the two martial artists from other continents who were more of an outsider than Guo Baimu, Yi Yunyun would not underestimate Cao Mo. Pei Qian did not look carefully at the two sparring. His gaze was more focused on the scenery. Chen Pinggan did not deliberately avoid the two of them. It was a rare opportunity and he could roughly judge the principles behind the martial Saint Wu Qiao and the Cloud Cottage. However, this was still due to his high cultivation level. Otherwise, when Chen Pinggan was only at the 3rd to 5th level, as long as the other party did not mind, Chen Pinggan could have asked them to slow down their punches. Otherwise, he would not be able to see clearly. Therefore, what Chen Pinggan paid attention to was not the moves of the two, but the little bit of meaning of the martial artists. This little bit of meaning could be divided into two types. One was the divine intent of the martial artist, where the source of the flowing water came from. The other was the martial artist's temperament. It was like a piece of heart that determined how much fist intent a martial artist could carry, the width of the martial path he walked, and how high his martial arts attainments were. As for other than this little bit of meaning, it was nothing more than the toughness of the martial artist's body. Whether or not he was made of paper, he would know the answer after taking a punch. Chen Pinggan said mentally to Pei Qian, martial artists under the heavens learn the martial arts. It is but one matter of hitting others and one being hit. The ultimate goal is nothing more than I can hit you with one more punch. Pei Qian naturally understood. Chen Pinggan smiled and asked, What if you were to suppress your cultivation level and exchange punches with that Guobaimu? Pei Qian said honestly, I will knock him down with one punch. The prerequisite is that the deity drum beating stance is equivalent to one punch. If it were other moves, it would probably take 2 or 3 punches. Chen Pinggan was just about to speak when Pei Qian hurriedly added, Master, I said that I would suppress my cultivation level at the 6th level. I did not say that I would look down on that martial saint's direct disciple and suppress my cultivation level at the 5th level just because I let my guard down. Chen Pinggan smiled faintly, pretending to be calm. Actually, what he meant just now was for Pei Qian to suppress his cultivation level at the golden body stage and spar with Guobaimu at the same level. Hard to talk to. Feed a hammer-like punch. Previously at the Great Wall of Sword Chi, one of the things that the hidden official had been thinking about the most if he could return home was to properly suppress his cultivation level and feed his first disciple a round of punches on the 2nd floor of the bamboo house. Crawl back up from where you fell. From the looks of it now, it seemed that as long as he dared to suppress his cultivation level and feed his punches, he would fall back down from where he stood up. How could this be? Pei Qian sighed, I am not master. Suppressing my cultivation level and fighting against an enemy is something I cannot do well. Chen Pinggan maintained his smile, saying, then continue to work hard. Otherwise, what would be the point of having a master? You do not have to purposely not look at the punches. That would only make it seem like you are trying to hide something. Just look at it openly. Yi Yunyun would not mind. Perhaps in the future, Guobaimu will come to Luo Po Mountain of his own accord and look for Zheng Qian to learn the punches. Pei Qian scratched his head. The fist techniques of Mount Pushan's Cloudgrass Hall were extremely mysterious. They focused on the path of a stance fist. Studying this fist technique was like cultivating. Mount Pushan's ancestral master hall had more than 10 formation diagrams. Many fist stances and fist techniques were evolved from the immortal diagrams. When one attacked, the fist had to hit the crouching cow, and victory would be decided within 10 feet. When one fought with an enemy, one had to quickly attack and take the enemy's place. The Pushan martial artist's steps were few and fast. His fist techniques were concise and powerful. Any beginner fist stance or fist technique would require the Pushan martial artist to repeatedly practice tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of times. After accumulating for a long time, the fist intent would stack. Therefore, once one attacked, it was almost instinctive. It was easy to gain the upper hand by striking first. Moreover, they were good at exchanging punches with the enemy. They would only need to throw out 2 or 3 punches in exchange for one punch from the enemy. This was the unique way of treating guests of the Cloudgrass Hall. If it was a life and death battle between martial artists of the same level, the Pushan martial artist would be known as deciding life and death with one punch. This was also the reason why Jiang Shangzhen had asked Yi Yunyun not to easily spar with the martial saint Wu Guang. Wu Guang's fists were so heavy that there was almost no martial virtue to speak of. Yi Yunyun's fists were also not light and were extremely ruthless. The king of martial artists of the North Continent had once said that Pei Asyong of the Thunder God Temple fought like a woman while Yi Yunyun of the Cloudgrass Hall fought like a man. It was a pity that Asyong did not marry Huang Yiyun. Pei Qian was slightly more attentive. After watching the Q-seeking fist, he endured it. He endured it again and again. In the end, he could not endure it and whispered to his master, Guobaimu's fists are beautiful and he is also experienced in fighting. However, he really cannot take a heavy punch. According to master, he has only learned half of the fist technique. If he encounters a life and death battle where he is at a slight disadvantage, Guobaimu will be in big trouble. However, this Xuehuai's fists are too rigid. Even when it comes to suppressing the enemy, he is so weak that his fist intent is stagnant. Master, did the martial saint Wu Guang and Huang Yiyun not teach him properly? Chen Pinggan said helplessly, watch more and speak less. Pei Qian said, oh. Guobaimu was Wu Guang's first disciple and most likely his last disciple. Therefore, he had learned all of Wu Guang's fist techniques. Xuehuai was also a direct disciple who was highly regarded by Yi Yunyun. In a Q-seeking fist that took half an hour, the two of them only had 3 chances to fight. Moreover, their fists were simple and unadorned. There were almost no obvious stances. In short, they did not look like martial artists of Jianghu. They did not jump and wander around randomly, did not open their bodies randomly, and did not make any noise. In the eyes of the spectators, there was naturally nothing to see. If they only learned two fist techniques and did not meet their expectations, then opening a martial arts club in Jianghu would definitely not have any business. They would be so poor that they would not be able to eat. Yi Yunyun said, "Let's all rest for half an hour." Later, Xue Huai does not need to suppress the enemy. Xue Huai and Guo Baimu took a step back at the same time and saluted each other with clasped fists. After entering the main hall of the mansion, the host and the guest took their seats. Xue Huai and Guo Baimu remained outside. Yi Xuanji had prepared tea. It was the most famous rotten rope tea in Cloudwater Ferry. The name of the tea was not pleasant, but it tasted good. It was one of the top 10 famous teas in Tongye Island. Pei Qian had wanted to stand behind her master, but Chen Pinggan asked her to sit down. Chen Pinggan glanced at Pei Qian, who was sitting upright and still. Many years ago, Pei Qian was still a little girl who would not sit if she could lie down, and would not stand if she could sit. Every time she traveled far to rest, as long as she saw a table or stool, she would run like crazy and quickly grab the seat. But at that time, she was young and often sat on the chair with her feet unable to step on the ground. Chen Pinggan collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Yunyun opposite him. He said, "I am familiar with old immortal Lu of the Green Tiger Palace. This time, I should pass by Mount Qingjing and Mount Tianqiu. When the time comes, I will ask for a few forgetting pills on behalf of Mount Pushan as an apology to you." Yi Yunyun shook her head and said, "That's too much. Mr. Cao, you don't have to be so polite." Seeing that Cao Mo was dressed in a long green robe like a scholar, Yi Yunyun simply called him Mr. since it was inappropriate for her to call him by his name. The old nascent soul of the Green Tiger Palace, Lu Yong, was now a famous alchemy grandmaster. Especially the forgetting pills of the Green Tiger Palace, which were one of Lu Yong's special skills in alchemy. This pill could help cultivators to calm their mind, nourish their heart acupoints, and remove the hidden dangers of cultivators. However, the forgetting pills were extremely difficult to make. In addition to consuming a lot of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, it also had high requirements for the right time and geographical location. The key was that it needed to consume the unique spiritual qi of Mount Qingjing. Therefore, in the past, the Hall of Ancestors of the Tongye sect would often reward Earth Immortals with a few forgetting pills. It was not that pure martial artists could not take this pill, but it was too wasteful. In the words of Lu Yong and a certain young Master Chen, giving the forgetting pills to a reckless man who had lost his way was like a cow chewing on a peony. It was too much of a waste. For the cloud cottage of Mount Pushan, where the boundary between martial artists and cultivators was not so clear, a furnace of forgetting pills, no matter how many there were, was a great tonic. Therefore, Cao Mo really knew how to conduct herself. If it were not for the shallow relationship between the two sides, Yi Yunyun would not have been so careless. The forgetting pills were rare on the mountain. If one could buy it at a high price, no matter how high the price, the more the better. Mount Pushan was willing to buy as many as the Green Tiger Palace had. However, back then, the Green Tiger Palace dominated the north. They would only take the forgetting pills to the top sects like the Tongye sect and the Taiping Mountain as a favor. It was not Mount Pushan's turn. Moreover, among the Earth Immortals of the continent, Lu Yong was recognized as the one who looked down on pure martial artists the most. Chen Pinggan lowered his head and drank a mouthful of tea. Holding the teacup in his hand, he looked up and smiled. "Senior, you may have misunderstood. It's my fault for not making it clear. I can only guarantee that old immortal Lu will sell it to the Cloud Cottage at a fair price, that the Green Tiger Palace will not make any profit or loss. I can't even be sure that the Green Tiger Palace has the forgetting pills now. But no matter what, as long as the pills are produced, old immortal Lu will immediately inform Mount Pushan. As for whether the Cloud Cottage is willing to buy it or not, it will depend on the Cloud Cottage decision." Yi Xuanji's eyes lit up. If not for the strict rules of the Pushan Yi family, she would have hurriedly persuaded her grandmaster to agree. Pei Qian seemed to be in a trance while sitting on the chair, but he had been paying attention to his master's expression and words. Sure enough, his master was experienced in doing things. His plan was flawless and watertight. If Yi Yunyun had agreed from the start, his master would have gone with the flow and given the forgetting pills to Mount Pushan for free. However, since Yi Yunyun was being polite, his master had his own way to remedy the situation. Each had their own way to go. It was his master, Mount Pushan, and the Green Tiger Palace. The three parties had some ties with each other, so it was still a relatively commercial transaction. Taking 10,000 steps back, if Yi Yunyun could not bring herself to do this and still refuse to agree, then his master could take the initiative to apologize and stop here. Yi Yunyun thought for a while and nodded with a smile. Then I'll thank you in advance, Mr. Cao. Chen Pinggan seemed to say casually, if the Green Tiger Palace does not have ready-made forgetting pills for the time being, I will also ask old Immortal Lu to send a letter to Mount Pushan to explain the situation roughly. Yi Yunyun looked at the man opposite her and smiled. Thank you, Mr. Cao. Please thank Immortal Lu for me. If you don't have the forgetfulness elixir for the time being, please inform Piyu Shan first when the Cyan Tiger Palace refines this elixir in the future. I will personally go to Qingjing Mountain to get the elixir and protect Immortal Lu and Qingjing Mountain. If Jiang Shangzhen had not explained it earlier, Yi Yunyun would have really thought that this guy was talking nonsense. The current Lu Yong of the Heavenly Fault Peak could not be regarded as an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. In the territory of a continent, except for the Jade Gui sect and the Thousand Jade sect, Lu Yong could not give face to the Golden Peak Temple at all, let alone the Cloud Herb Hall and the White Dragon Cave. Chen Pinggan stood up, and Pei Qian immediately followed suit. Chen Pinggan cupped his fists and said, then I won't disturb senior's teaching. Yi Yunyun stood up, looked at Zheng Qian, and asked with a smile, why don't you let Zheng Qian and Xue Huai spar? Chen Pinggan looked at Pei Qian. Pei Qian's meaning was very clear. Master had the final say on whether to spar or not. If they really wanted to spar, Xue Huai would be knocked down with one punch or several punches. Master could just say it. She knew how to control the number of punches and the weight of her punches. Chen Pinggan shook his head with a smile. Let's forget about it today. We can talk about it when we have the chance to visit Mount Pushan in the future. Yi Yunyun stood up to see them off. This time, she walked them all the way to the Moon Cave gate. It was Cao Mo who politely refused to see her off. Otherwise, Yi Yunyun would have walked all the way to the gate of the mansion. Yi Xuanji walked with Yi Yunyun on the bamboo forest path and said in her mind, Grandmaster Grandma, this Mr. Cao has a good temper. When I helped to refill the tea, he didn't forget to nod to me to thank me. If Zhu Fei's gaze made women feel that they were wearing too little clothes, then this Mr. Cao's gaze would make Yi Xuanji feel that even if he accidentally saw a picture of a beauty coming out of the bath, he would not look at it. Yi Yunyun said calmly, he's indeed a gentleman. Actually, she only said half a sentence. The other half was not suitable to be said to a junior of the family. Cao Mo was too smart. Yi Xuanji still could not believe it. She asked doubtfully, can he really help us buy a furnace of Tian Q Peak's forgetfulness pills? This is not a small favor. Old Palace Master Lu of the Green Tiger Palace is very disgusted with all the martial artists at the foot of the mountain because of that old grudge. The most mysterious thing about this pill was that it could make a cultivator's heart guard. It was like the two-door gods at the gate of the people at the foot of the mountain to ward off evil and filth. It could help cultivators to guard their hearts. Every time a Qi refinement warrior entered a state of forgetfulness, his mind would be immersed in a small world. It could even make an Earth Immortal's aurous core and nascent soul look as if they were wearing a feather robe. Therefore, the forgetfulness pill that was specially made by the Green Tiger Palace had always been known as the Feather Robe Pill on Tungyezu Mountain. A Daoist perfected being of the Green Tiger Palace once went down the mountain to protect his disciple. He was seriously injured by a martial artist of the distant travel state. His aurous core was shattered and his Dao was cut off. As for the 8th realm martial artist who injured him, his master was later seriously injured by the martial sage Wu Qiao. He needed several elixirs to keep his life. The forgetfulness pill of the Green Tiger Palace was one of them. The distant travel state martial artist personally went to the Green Tiger Palace to ask for the elixir. Lu Yong did not care how the other party humbly apologized and refused to visit. In the end, the martial artist of the distant travel state passed away after 10 years. Otherwise, with a few furnaces of forgetfulness pills, it would not be a big problem for him to live for another 5 or 6 years. Therefore, it was too easy to turn the tables on grudges on the mountain. It was enough to be secretly happy when watching others make a fool of themselves, even if they could not help but laugh out loud. Yi Yunyun nodded and said, "Since Cao Mo has asked, Lu Yong will most likely agree." Yi Xuanji smiled sweetly and said in a low voice, "Mr. Cao looks like he comes from a wealthy family. His actions and words are very romantic." It was rare for Yi Yunyun to smile in front of the younger generation of Mount Pu. For the first time, she joked, "What? You've only gone down the mountain for a few days and you've already forgotten the flowers and willows on the mountain under the moonlight?" Although Yi Yunyun usually did not smile, she was still the master of a mountain. She was also not some martial arts fanatic who only knew how to learn martial arts. Otherwise, Mount Pu would not have such a grand occasion today. Yi Xuanji's pretty face turned red. She asked tentatively, Grandmother, have you never met a man who made your heart beat in your life?" Yi Yunyun shook her head. The love between a man and a woman is meaningless. It's better to learn martial arts and stand at the top of the mountain. After Chen Pinggan left this mansion, he did not leave Huangheji and return to Yunming Peak. Instead, he cast a camouflage spell for himself and Pei Qian. Spiritual qi rippled around them, making their figures and faces unreal. Then he took Pei Qian to another immortal mansion on the same street. Before leaving Yi Yunyun's mansion, Chen Pinggan had already covered his face again. At this moment, it was still a beautiful talisman who opened the door. Chen Pinggan asked if this was the place where Reed Eagle was worshipped in the Golden Peak Temple. The beautiful talisman was not angry. She just smiled and did not speak, because it was against the rules. Chen Pinggan told her his name and background. Cao Mo, Jiang family's worshipper. As soon as she heard that Cao Mo was Jiang family's worshipper and had the first-class fasting tablet hanging on his waist, the beautiful talisman immediately said that she would go and report this matter. Could Cao Mo please wait for a moment? Although the beautiful talisman was a puppet, the Shui Lu on Yuji Mound used the method of haunted house. The beauty's skin refined by the talisman was like an inn. Female ghosts or souls were allowed to reside in it, so that every beautiful talisman was no different from an ordinary person in terms of appearance or intelligence. However, the reason why the beautiful talisman of the Shui Lu could be the best in a continent was because of the two masters of painting who were responsible for drawing the talisman. One of them could draw a woman's unique charm on the talisman paper, so that every beautiful talisman of the Shui Lu was different. Their eyes were bright and beautiful, and they were not rigid. The other master of painting could add the finishing touch, so that every beautiful talisman was like a rare and unique book in a collection. Unfortunately, the great demon's attack was unstoppable and its methods were brutal. In the end, Yuji Mound was destroyed and Shui Tower collapsed. As Daoist companions on the mountain, the two great artists chose to burn all of their talismans and self-destruct their jindan to die for love. While waiting at the door, Chen Pinggan asked in his mind, "What are you thinking about?" Pei Qian said, "It seems to be harder to give a favor than to receive a favor." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "I didn't go to Jianghu in vain." Pei Qian asked curiously, "Master, why are you looking for this Reed Eagle?" Chen Pinggan said, "To confirm with my own eyes the style of the Golden Summit Monastery." Pei Qian said, "Golden Summit Monastery? Yin Miaofeng and Shao Yuanran?" Chen Pinggan nodded. Those two great consecrators can be considered old acquaintances of ours. Reed Eagle slowly walked to the door and made a Taoist bow. The chief reverend of the Golden Summit Monastery, Reed Eagle. Chen Pinggan also made a Taoist bow. Second-class reverend of the Jiang clan of the Cloud Cave, second-class honored guest of the Joey Peak of the Jade Gui sect, second-class honored guest of the Hall of Ancestral Masters of the Divine Seal Peak, Cao Mo Pei Qian kept a straight face and tried not to laugh. What was wrong with his master? He made up a series of titles. Was he purposely showing off his identity, or was he purposely showing off his cowardice? Reed Eagle endured the discomfort in his heart and said with a kind expression, "I wonder why honored guest Cow is here today?" Chen Pingan smiled and said, "There was a misunderstanding earlier, so I had to pay a special visit to apologize to the Reverend." Reed Eagle asked, "Is it about White Dragon Cave's Yu Chi sparring with someone?" Dragon Gate cultivator Yu Chi and Cave Abode cultivator Ma Linsha. They were all top cultivation geniuses on the mountain, especially Lin Chi, who had an extremely high seniority in White Dragon Cave. He had the potential to become an Earth Immortal and had the potential to become a resurgence ancestor in White Dragon Cave's history. Although it was destined to be difficult for him to reach the upper 5 realms, there was still hope. Many cultivators and so-called young talents did not even dare to dream of becoming an Earth Immortal. Chen Pingan nodded and said, "That's right." Reed Eagle smiled and said, "Honored guest Cow, did you knock on the wrong door? I'm from the Golden Summit Monastery and not some White Dragon Cave cultivator. The reason why I left the Daoist temple was to protect those children. The one who tied the bell should untie it. Since the misunderstanding is with White Dragon Cave, we should resolve the misunderstanding with White Dragon Cave as soon as possible. Guest Elder Cow, don't you agree? I have nothing to talk about with a mere Dragon Gate cultivator from White Dragon Cave." Chen Pingan said with a slightly mocking expression, "You're a highly respected senior on Tongye Island. I've heard a lot about you. If I don't come here, where should I go? Even if the 2 ancestors of White Dragon Cave are guests at Huang Heji today, I'll just pretend I didn't see them. As for whether it's a misunderstanding, to be honest, I don't really care. It's still hard to say who should apologize to who and who should pay a visit." Reed Eagle stroked his beard and smiled. He nodded and sighed, "Honored guest Cow is a sentimental person. So it was another person who came for his Golden Summit Monastery title." Along the way, Reed Eagle had seen a lot. There were immortal scribes on the mountain, emperors and generals at the foot of the mountain, martial artists and heroes in the pugilistic world. There were as many of them as carps crossing the river. Generally speaking, everything went according to his wishes. Wu Kuang's direct disciple, Guobaimu, and the martial artists and cultivators of Cloud Herb Hall all knew their place. It was just that White Dragon Cave was restless. That was good, as it gave Reed Eagle more chances to show his face. For example, in Great Spring Mirage City, Ma Linsha, the little troublemaker, had provoked a relative of the royal family. A sloppy man with a crippled leg and a broken arm was drinking with a group of rough men in a restaurant. He was so carefree that he seemed to have the smell of horse dung. Who would have thought that such a person was the younger brother of the Great Spring Empress? Then, in this Cloud Cave blessed land with strict rules, it was Ma Linsha who caused Yu Chi to be beaten unconscious by a little fatty who called himself the invincible Little Divine Fist. After losing face, Yu Chi had been making a fuss about returning to his sect while secretly sending a message to White Dragon Cave with his flying sword. Reed Eagle treated it as watching a show to relieve his boredom. At this moment, the reason why Reed Eagle was so patient and was willing to spend his time with the last of the Jade Gui sect. In the records on the mountain, the more scattered guest elders were not as good as the consecrators. This guy who called himself the last of the Jade Gui sect really made Reed Eagle unable to find any interest in making friends with him. On the other hand, the white-clothed youth who was squatting on the railing at that time, although he looked sloppy and full of nonsense, he was most likely an Earth Immortal with the word sect in his name. He didn't reveal anything. His methods were even more wild than Reed Eagle's. He actually dared to use the fixed body technique on Yu Chi in Jiang Shangzhen's Cloud Cave Blessed Land just because of his cultivation level. Of course, there was also Ju Fei, who Reed Eagle already bore a grudge against. Reed Eagle didn't dare to act rashly. The current Tongyi continent was filled with muddy waters. There were too many dragons crossing the river. For example, the father and daughter from the Thousand Jade sect of the Three Mountains Blessed Land. The immortal Han Yushu and the Jade Unpolished Realm Han Jianshu were extremely fearful of them. To be honest, as long as they weren't cultivators from other continents, Reed Eagle really didn't think much of the native cultivators of his own Tongyi continent. For example, the guy in front of him had 3 titles, but none of them were truly important. Reed Eagle gradually lost his patience. He didn't expect that person to have the face to shift his gaze and look inside the door. He was probably hinting at his consecrator. Why didn't he bring them in for a chat? Reed Eagle sneered in his heart. In an instant, he tried to use the great powers of a nascent soul cultivator to see through the mountain river ripple concealment technique. Reed Eagle didn't care if this action was taboo or not. He wanted to use this to determine guest elder Cow's worth. Cow Mo immediately cast another mountain river ripple concealment technique, his face faintly showing anger. Reed Eagle's heart settled. He was indeed a decent Jindan cultivator from the mountain. Cow Mo flung his sleeves and walked down the stairs. Suddenly, he turned his head and said, "In the future, if the consecrator wants to bring people down the mountain for training, it's best to choose to leave at noon." Reed Eagle still stood in the same place. He was confused by what he heard, mistaking it for a mysterious saying from a cultivator on the mountain. Pei Qian said indifferently, "Because something will happen sooner or later." Reed Eagle's face turned gloomy. His realm wasn't high and his status wasn't high, but his guts weren't small. As expected, he was born as an immortal scribe. He probably relied on the incense offerings accumulated in the ancestral hall to get a consecrator and a guest elder from the Cloud Cave Blessed Land and Jade Gui sect's Joey Peak. Reed Eagle raised his foot and stepped over the threshold for the first time. The two people immediately left. Among them, guest elder Cow even intentionally or unintentionally tugged at the fasting tablet on his waist. Reed Eagle retracted his foot and sneered. He turned around and muttered to the old nascent soul cultivator behind him, "These F*King immortal scribe, they can't change their bad habit of eating tea no matter where they go." On the street, Chen Pingan and Pei Qian both heard Reed Eagle's muttering. Pei Qian smiled and said, "Master, this guy is very good at quarreling. He's even fiercer when scolding himself than when scolding others. He won't lose." Chen Pingan frowned. He felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't find any clues. It was a kind of intuition that something had gone wrong. There was no reason to explain it. If there really was a reason, it would probably be this hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. He always learned his lesson after being beaten. Pei Qian said, "Master, this person's Dao heart is filthy." The Golden Peak Monastery chose Reed Eagle as their chief consecrator. Their sect's morals can't be good. Chen Pingan nodded. Reed Eagle teased the talisman beauty beside him for a while. After he returned to his residence, he let the beauty leave. After a while, the old nascent soul fell into a chair. His hands gripped the armrest tightly. His face was filled with disbelief. He was sweating profusely and muttered, "How is it possible? Didn't this person return to the wilderness?" Previously, Reed Eagle used a unique secret technique to see through the camouflage. He wanted to beat the grass and scare the snake. He wanted to confirm whether guest elder Cow Mo was an Aurus core cultivator or not and take a look at the woman's true appearance. If she was good-looking, it would be a waste not to look. This was a divine Dao technique that Reed Eagle obtained from a mystic realm. It could see a person's true appearance. However, under normal circumstances, Reed Eagle would not use it easily. Firstly, it was not very useful. The appearance of the cultivators on the mountain was not important at all. What was important was their pedigree, identity, realm, and magic treasures. Moreover, Reed Eagle's foundation of cultivation and the reason why he could reach the nascent soul stage step by step was mostly because of the opportunity from the ancient mansion in the fragmented mystic realm. That old debt was related to the tragic death of more than 10 direct disciples of the two sects. Therefore, even when facing the young man in white and Zhu Fei, who was standing beside Huang Yiyun, Reed Eagle would pretend that he did not have this useless divine Dao technique. Who would have thought that with just one look, Lu Ying would see a calamity that could topple the heavens? Back then, in the Golden Peak Monastery, where the young Aurus core cultivator Xiao Yuanran cultivated, Reed Eagle inadvertently saw a portrait on the table. Xiao Yuanran wrote 2 names on it: Chen Yin and Chen Pingan. At that time, Xiao Yuanran's expression changed slightly, and Reed Eagle knew that there must be a big mystery in it. In the end, after scheming against each other, Reed Eagle got a vague answer. The identity of this person was unpredictable and his origin was strange. He had once stirred up trouble in the Great Spring Dynasty. However, Xiao Yuanran only said that he could be sure that the Great Spring Mirage City was surrounded but not attacked. The reason why it could be preserved was that this person had planned to take the capital city as his own. Xiao Yuanran was ruthless enough. Not only did he not need Reed Eagle to swear, but he also made Reed Eagle more useful than swearing to keep it a secret. Because Xiao Yuanran said that this person, Chen Pingan, was most likely one of the 10 young people, the leader of the 100 sword immortals in the moon-bearing mountain in the wilderness, Feiran. Reed Eagle wiped the sweat on his forehead and exhaled a long breath. Feiran. Chen Pingan. Cao Mo, the Jiang family's worshipper? The visiting professor of the Divine Seal Peak? Why did the Jade sect, like the Great Spring Dynasty, stand strong in the end? Was it inside here? Reed Eagle began to sweat again. He simply did not wipe it. His Dao heart was unstable. He only felt that he had walked through the gates of hell. Anyway, I didn't see anything and I don't know anything. Whether it is Cao Mo or Feiran, just let them be. Even if Du Hanling of the Golden Apex Temple hears about this, I won't say a word. Reed Eagle's movements were stiff. He slowly turned his head and looked at the door. A woman in black with her hair tied up in a bun was leaning against the door. She had her arms around her chest and seemed to be smiling. Just as Reed Eagle was about to stand up, a gentle voice behind him smiled and said, "Sit." A green-robed man stood behind the chair and gently pressed a finger against the back of the chair. Reed Eagle immediately put down the but that he had just lifted and sat on the chair in a daze. He was like Yu Qi who had been hit by the fixed body spell. He was an old nascent soul who had seen countless storms and waves. He did not move at all. Other than sweating, he did not dare to think casually. The person behind him folded his hands on the back of the chair and asked with a smile, "Junior came here without permission. Will the spiritual master be angry?" Reed Eagle did not dare to shake his head too much. He only dared to shake his head slightly. A wild cultivator who did not recognize his own family was like an immortal master who saw his own ancestor. He said firmly, "No, no. Junior doesn't dare. It's impossible." After a moment, Reed Eagle's face was ashen and his lips were trembling. Because the old nascent soul who was unwilling to wait for death, he used another trump card to escape. He quietly condensed his Jindan and nascent soul on a piece of mind and suddenly disappeared. He wanted to leave the mansion and report to the only person he could trust now, Huang Yiyun. As for the Cloud Cave Blessed Land Jiang clan and the Jade sect's Divine Seal Peak, he did not dare to believe them. When the time came, he would pull Yi Yunyun and hide beside her. Then, he would protect a spot of the mirror and quickly inform the Golden Peak Temple. Then, he would have a chance of survival, and at most, it would be a real chance of survival. If he wanted to tell the world, forget it. Not to mention whether Jiang Shangzhen would give him a chance. Even if he could, Reed Eagle would not be willing to exchange his life for merit unless he was in a situation where he would definitely die. So what if he exposed the inside story of the collusion between the Jade sect and the Wasteland? The merit of the Confucian Temple would all fall on the Golden Peak Temple's head, but he, Reed Eagle, would die and disappear completely. However, Reed Eagle did not expect that the peace of mind that could make immortals unpredictable would go round and round, as if it was a ghost going around a wall. The person behind him laughed and said, "You can't even be a fence-sitter. How can you be a nascent soul senior and old immortal?" Lu Ying sighed and said in a relatively unfamiliar manner, "Feiran, I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. You can kill me or cut me up as you wish." The person nodded and said 2 words, "All right." Reed Eagle's face immediately turned bitter and he no longer looked heroic. "Sword Immortal Feiran, let's talk again. As long as you leave me a way out, I will definitely do anything." The person stretched out a hand and grabbed Reed Eagle's neck with 5 hook-like fingers. In that instant, Reed Eagle could not even speak, let alone speak. However, the person urged, "Talk? Say something. A way out. Not to mention a nascent soul Reed Eagle, so many people have died and left a way out for the Tongyi continent. You are the best in the world when it comes to scolding and joking. Pei Qian had nothing to do, so she sat on the doorstep. She did not care what her master said or did. Pei Qian only touched her hair and rubbed her forehead. Unknowingly, she had not put on a talisman for many years. Many years ago, when the young lady was still a little charcoal, her master would help her wash her hair and teach her how to tidy up her messy hair. There was no such thing as poor mountains, bad rivers, or evil people's hearts. The master and disciple traveled far and wide, and it seemed that everywhere was beautiful. Many years later, when she traveled the Jianghu alone, she would always hear the saying that following her master was like being reincarnated. She felt that the old saying made sense. After acknowledging her master, she was like a little girl who was reincarnated. She was reincarnated into a good family, and it was the best in the world. In fact, all these years, when her master was not by her side, Pei Qian would occasionally feel that practicing martial arts was very tough. If she did not practice martial arts back then and hid on Luo Po Mountain, would it have been better? Especially after she returned with her master, Pei Qian did not even dare to pull her master's sleeves, so she felt that way even more. There was nothing good about growing up. However, when she accompanied her master to sneak into the mansion today, her master finally did not need to worry about her. He did not need to deliberately tell her what to do and what not to do, and she seemed to finally be able to do something for her master. Pei Qian felt that practicing martial arts was very good. It did not suffer much and her realm was not high enough. When Pei Qian came back to her senses, she found that her master had already moved a chair and sat opposite Reed Eagle. Chen Pingan turned his head and scolded, "How dare you be distracted in front of a powerful enemy?" Pei Qian scratched her head. "Master is here. I was just being lazy." Chen Pingan glared at her. Pei Qian hurriedly said, "I know, master. I will pay attention next time." But to be honest, even if Pei Qian stood still and took the Yuanying realm Reed Eagle's killing technique, she would still be injured, and he would be beaten to death without any suspense. It was not that Pei Qian looked down on the cultivators in the world, but when it came to physique, even those in the pure jade realm were like paper. After taking one or two punches, they liked to fall straight to the ground and play dead, trying to cheat her of her money. However, Pei Qian did not dare to say such things to her master. She could ask for anything but chestnuts. Zhong Changming was an old woman, but she still had some standards in her words. Pei Qian looked around. It was a small world with dense sword qi. Her master was a sword immortal. Chen Pingan did not know what Pei Qian was thinking. He just chatted with a Yuanying realm senior who he had heard of for a long time. While listening to Reed Eagle talk about a few of Na Feiran's deeds that were not widely known, he laughed and scolded, "What a shameless bastard. I don't have a grandson like him." Reed Eagle was very sad. "Why are you acting with me, Feiran sword immortal? What's the point of it?" Chen Pingan did not mind Reed Eagle's belief that he was Na Feiran. It would be best if Du Hanling of the Golden Peak Temple also thought so. Once both sides were well aware, the situation would become very interesting. About an hour later, Lu Ying first cast the body-fixing spell on the beautiful woman who worked as the concierge of the residence. Then, he sent guest elder Cao Mo to the gate alone. Although the chief consecrator of the Golden Peak Temple was amiable, his expression inevitably revealed a bit of arrogance. Obviously, he still regarded himself as a senior. After a few words of encouragement to Cao Mo, the two sides bid farewell. Jiang Shangzhen took out a snow-white cloud boat ferry. Of course, it was his private collection. The ferry was refined from the moonlight and white clouds in the blessed land. It traveled very fast in the night. Its quality was similar to the flipping ink dragon boat in the Luopa mountain. Jiang Shangzhen did not take the ferry to the north. He said that he still needed to stay in the Cloud Cave blessed land for a few more months. After the selection of the 36 flower goddesses on the Rouge stage was over, he would leave for the heavenly Fault Peak. Bai Xian was more happy. Finally, everyone had a room. Brother Ju Fei was a rich and loyal friend. It was worth making friends with him. Among the 9 children, Sun Chunwang did not show up. She was always detained in Kui Dongshan's heaven and earth sleeve. Kui Dongshan was very curious about how many decades this girl with dead fish eyes could endure in there. A cultivator's Tao heart was the strangest thing. It could be a piece of unpolished jade that needed to be carefully carved. It could be a piece of iron that needed to be fiercely tempered. It could be the moon in the water that was broken by external forces and returned to its original shape. It could be. Therefore, not all sword immortal embryos were suitable for tempering their Tao hearts in Kui Dongshan's heaven and earth sleeve. Other than Sun Chunwang, Bai Xian and Yu Qingzhong were more suitable. Kui Dongshan sat on the railing and took out a folding fan. He gently tapped his palm and asked, "I heard from Fatty that you were actually quite mute when you were practicing your swordsmanship in the hairpin. Other than eating, practicing, and sleeping, you would at most borrow books from Yu Qingzhong to read. Your cold eyes and cold face made people feel that you were not easy to get along with. Why did you change so drastically when you saw my husband?" Bai Xian sat to the side and carefully considered his words. He said timidly, "It's like entering a room of orchids. After a long time, you will naturally become fragrant." Kui Dongshan twitched the corner of his mouth. "You're not sincere enough." Bai Xian drooped his head and remained silent for a long time. He raised his head and looked at the sea of clouds in the distance. The sun set over the sea of clouds and the scenery was wonderful. It was very similar to the city walls of his hometown. Kui Dongshan said, "Why did you give yourself the nickname of a lowly recluse?" Bai Xian said softly, "My master is a Dragon Gate realm sword cultivator. My master's master is only at the Golden Core realm. In fact, the three of us are very poor. In order to let me practice my swordsmanship, we became even poorer." Kui Dongshan said, "Your master is a woman?" Bai Xian grunted. "She's not good-looking and likes to scold people. When I was young, I was playful. Every time I was scolded to the point of sadness, I would run away from home. I would go to Grand Elephant Street and Jade Edict Street for a stroll, complaining that my master was a pauper. I thought that if I were taken in as a disciple of a rich sword immortal, I wouldn't have to suffer so much. What's the point of having money?" When he was young. In fact, Bai Xian was still a child. However, all children in the world would feel that they were no longer young. All the elderly would be afraid that they were too old. Kui Dongshan said, "Was your master seriously injured on the battlefield? Did you accompany her before she passed away?" Bai Xian fell silent for a long time before he finally nodded. He said softly, "Not all the way. I only accompanied her for a night. When she retreated from the battlefield, her intrinsic flying sword was gone. Her face was mangled by sword chi. If not for Lord Recluse's pills, she wouldn't have lasted that long. She would have died before dawn. Every time she tried her best to open her eyes, as though she wanted to see me clearly, it was very scary. Every time she grinned at me, it was even scarier. I didn't dare cry out loud. I actually knew that I was a good-for-nothing back then. I even made her very sad, but there was nothing I could do. I was just afraid." Therefore, Bai Xian was so afraid of the female ghost whose face was covered in blood. Bai Xian said softly, "We didn't win that battle, but we didn't lose either. Therefore, I'm especially grateful to Chen Pinggan. My master and my master's master didn't die in vain." Kui Dongshan asked, "It's been so long. Is there anything you wish to tell your master?" "I've never thought of it." Bai Xian shook his head and thought for a moment. He said, "I'll probably say something like I'll practice my swordsmanship well." "Master, don't worry." The child had a focused expression as he thought of his master. Kui Dongshan nodded. In an instant. The world was vast. Then, Bai Xian saw a female ghost with a bloody face standing not far away. He recognized her as his master. His master was looking at him. Bai Xian suddenly realized that he had a lot to say to his master, and he didn't seem to be afraid of her anymore. Bai Xian walked over, stretched out his hand, and gently grabbed her sleeve. Kui Dongshan stood far behind the master and disciple, watching this scene from afar. On the ferry, Chen Pinggan was in his room, carving a red seal. At the foot of the mountain, the red seal had always been more difficult than the white seal. Pei Qian sat quietly on the side. After his master finished carving the seal, he asked, "Master, Are you going to give it to old immortal Lu of the Green Tiger Palace? Lu Yong of the Green Tiger Palace on the heavenly fault peak of the Qingjing Mountain. Pei Qian had a deep impression of him. He was an old immortal who was very good at talking. His skill of being polite and giving away favors was superb. His master said that there were only a few places to rest on this trip to the north. Other than the heavenly fault peak, the ferry would only stop near the Great Spring Dynasty's Buried River and Mirage City. His master wanted to meet the water goddess and old General Yarrow, who was said to be bedridden. Chen Pinggan smiled and nodded. It's a greeting gift. The side of the seal read, "A kind heart is the best feng shui. Foundation, Qingjing." Chen Pinggan took out a stack of books from the nearby objects. He bought them from the Chishan ferry market. Go back to your room and copy the books. Pei Qian didn't move. He took out a pen and paper and copied the books on his master's side. Chen Pinggan didn't stop him. He stood up and looked at Pei Qian's copy. He nodded and said, "Your handwriting is not bad. You have half of your style." Just as Pei Qian was about to say a few sincere words, his master bent his finger and gently tapped on the table, reminding him, "You have to focus on copying." Chen Pinggan sat back down and picked up a book. The disciple copied the book, and the master flipped the book. The northern Jin kingdom bordered the southern border of the Great Quan dynasty. The only thing that was better than the southern Qi kingdom was that it had continued its rule. After these years of recuperation, it had finally recovered some of its vitality. The capital of the southern Qi kingdom had once been the base of a military camp in the wilderness. One could imagine the fate of the country's mountains and rivers. The civil and military temples were all destroyed. As for the city god, the gods of the land, and the mountains and rivers, they were all occupied by the local Yarrow of the Tongya continent. From the imperial court to the Jianghu, it could no longer be described as a foul atmosphere. One day, Chen Pinggan walked out of his room and came to the bow of the ship. Pei Qian was overlooking the mountains and rivers. Beside her were the two little girls, Nailan Yuji and Yarrow Xiaoyan. Chen Pinggan asked, "Will we pass by the territory of the Jin Huang prefecture?" Pei Qian nodded vigorously and estimated. About 800 li. She thought that her master had forgotten about this. Thinking back, she was the only one who accompanied her master to travel the Tongya continent. For the first time, Pei Qian saw with her own eyes the beating of gongs and drums at the wedding of a mountain god. Later, she was inadvertently involved in a battle between the mountain god and the water god. Before reuniting with her master, Pei Qian traveled alone along the old route of the Tongya continent. During this time, she passed by the rebuilt Jin Huang prefecture, but Pei Qian had no intention of visiting. The ruler of the Jin Huang prefecture of the northern Jin kingdom had been schemed against by the third prince of the Great Quan dynasty. He had been reduced to a prisoner and detained in Mirage City. Unexpectedly, he had profited from the disaster and escaped that calamity. Pei Qian roughly told her master about the recent situation of the Jin Huang prefecture. She had previously traveled alone and heard about it at the foot of the mountain. The ghost wife that the prefect had married had now become the water god of the nearby lake. Although her realm was not high, her rank was not low. It was said that this was the work of the Great Quan Empress. It had already become a legend on the mountain. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Just in time. Back then, I had made an appointment with the mountain god prefect to visit the Jin Huang prefecture whenever I passed by and ask for a cup of wine from him." Kui Dongshan was strolling on the railing. Behind him was Bai Xian with his hands behind his back. Behind Bai Xian was Cheng Chaolu, who was practicing martial arts. Kui Dongshan shouted, "Mr. and Senior Sister, just be our guests. Leave the ferry to me." Bai Xian carried a bamboo sheath and a bamboo sword on his back. Nailan Yuji and Yarrow Xiaoyan were excited and looked forward to it. The mountain god prefecture was such a rare place that they had never seen it before. Chen Pinggan took out a talisman boat and was about to bring Pei Qian and the two young ladies to travel with the wind. He Jiyu and Yu Xie rushed over and shouted that they wanted to go with them to broaden their horizons. Bai Xian sighed and shook his head. Childish, very childish. In the end, Kui Dongshan grabbed his head and threw him to the talisman boat. Bai Xian laughed loudly. He turned around and unsheathed his bamboo sword. Bai Xian stepped on the bamboo sword and quickly caught up with the talisman boat. He floated down and the bamboo sword returned to its sheath. He Jiyu and Yu Xie were envious. Bai Xian was indeed in the cave realm. Na Lan Yuji said in annoyance, Master Cao said that we are not allowed to reveal our identity as sword cultivators. Bai Xian sneered and said, young lady, you have long hair and short knowledge. With Brother Kui around, I have nothing to worry about, no matter the mountains and rivers, no matter the wind or the clouds. Pei Qian smiled and asked, no taboos. Did the big white goose teach you that? Bai Xian quickly weighed the weight of big senior sister and little senior brother. He probably felt that Kui Dongshan was more powerful. He could not be a fence-sitter. He put his hands behind his back and nodded. Of course. Brother Kui told me to be more courageous when I talk to people in the future. Brother Kui also promised to teach me a few unique fist techniques. He said that with my talent, a few days of learning fist techniques is equivalent to a few years of learning fist techniques for little fatty. When I go down the mountain alone to train, I will walk across the river and fly over the mountain on my sword. Brother Kui said that in the future on Luo Po Mountain, I will be both a swordmaster and a master. So I am the most like his teacher. Pei Qian smiled. Learning fist techniques is good. Bai Xian felt that something was wrong. He quickly made up for it. Sister Pei, if you want to spar in the future, you have to suppress your realm. I am still young and learned fist techniques late. Pei Qian nodded. No problem. When the time comes, I will suppress my realm. It is all up to you. Bai Xian laughed loudly and said, Elder Sister Pei is someone who practices martial arts. You must stick to your words. But Sister Pei does not have to worry. Although I learned fist techniques late, I learned fist techniques fast and broke through the realm faster. When the time comes, Sister Pei will not need to suppress your realm too much. Pei Qian nodded. Of course. Chen Pinggan glanced at Bai Xian with pity in his eyes. This little bastard who fancied himself clever seemed to have surpassed Chen Lingjun even more than he did. Bai Xian asked telepathically, Yuji, what realm is this Pei Qian in? We are from the same hometown. You can't help an outsider and lie to me. Nalan Yuji said, Sister Pei did not say her realm. Little Yang asked at Yunming Peak for a long time. Sister Pei just smiled and did not say anything. In the end, Little Yang was annoyed. Sister Pei only said that if she were to spar with Master, it would take about 100 Pei Qians to barely tie. Bai Xian glanced at the young girl. She was quite pitiful. As the first disciple of Hidden Official, her talent seemed to be very ordinary. When they were about 100 miles away from Jinhuang Mansion, the talisman boat quietly landed. The group walked towards Mountain God Mansion. Bai Xian asked, Master Cao, what are you doing? Walking with 2 legs is too tiring. Be careful that we are not given the door at Jinhuang Mansion. His Excellency sounds like a high official with his own mansion. Brother Kui told me that in the vast world, the Prime Minister's concierge is a 3rd-rank official. Very arrogant. Nalan Yuji grumbled, you talk too much. The realm of immortal abode and the tone of a sword immortal. He Jiyu nodded. Yes. Yu Xiehui added, the title of little hidden official is not enough. Only great hidden official is worthy of our Bai Xian. Bai Xian glanced at the 3. When I start learning fist techniques, I can easily reach the 5th or 6th realm. Adding the immortal abode realm, you can calculate for yourselves. Isn't that the upper 5 realms? Chen Pinggan smiled and shook his head. Pei Qian took out a green bamboo cane from the objects in front of her. She remembered something. It was around here that she received the first talisman in her life. A pagoda demon suppression talisman and a yang qi lantern raising talisman. But at first, Master lent them to her to boost her courage. Later, he gave them to her. Pei Qian whispered, Master, I met the talisman Yuxian in Jinjia continent. Chen Pinggan was a little surprised. That old immortal Yu who is known as the Soul Talisman? Pei Qian smiled and nodded. She blushed and said, "On the battlefield, old immortal, you not only helped me kill an unpolished Jade Realm demon, but also gave me the unpolished Jade Realm life item. It was a half-immortal weapon." Chen Pinggan sighed. Senior's immortal chi is unparalleled. Old immortal, you should have merged with the Dao Galaxy and reached the 14th realm. Pei Qian nodded. For Chen Pinggan and his group, the hundreds of miles of mountain road were not worth mentioning. And compared to the rugged road that Chen Pinggan passed through last time, it was much wider. Chen Pinggan glanced at it and knew that it was the work of the imperial court. Passing by a stone arch bridge that spanned a stream, Chen Pinggan squatted at the bridge and looked at the brand new boundary marker. He frowned slightly. He was a little hesitant about whether he should pay a visit to Jinhuang Prefecture. Pei Qian asked, "Master, what's wrong?" Chen Pinggan stood up and said, "There might be trouble." After thinking for a while, Chen Pinggan smiled. "It's okay. I'll leave after drinking." 30 miles away from Jinhuang Prefecture, there were beautiful mountains and clear waters. The stream gurgled and there was a pavilion by the river. There was a group of armored elite soldiers sitting on the side of the road. They were gambling for fun, but their voices were not loud. This was because there was a cultivator sitting cross-legged in the pavilion with a horsetail whisk in his hand. A young general leaned against the wall of the pavilion with his arms around his chest. He closed his eyes and held his breath in concentration. Chen Pinggan asked Pei Qian and the rest to stop and walked forward alone. There were 2 people inside and outside the pavilion, a sea-viewing cultivator and a 5th realm martial artist. The young general opened his eyes and said indifferently, "If you are going to Jinhuang Prefecture, you can go back. Now the mountains and rivers here are sealed." Chen Pinggan turned his head and looked in a direction. In the deep green pool of the stream, a pale face appeared. Her hair spread out like water plants. It was a young girl wearing a pomegranate dress. Then she sat on a rock on the opposite bank. However, the embroidered shoes on her feet were still submerged in the stream. She seemed to be arguing with the young general on purpose. She smiled and said, "Sealed the mountain? How come our Jinhuang Prefecture doesn't know about it? If you want to be a guest, I can lead the way." The old immortal in the pavilion snorted and waved his horsetail whisk. The stream outside the pavilion seemed to be blocked by a dam. The water level kept rising, and no more water flowed into the small pool. The female ghost did not seem to mind. However, she was shorter and her legs were submerged in the water more. She seemed to remember something and said to the man in green, "Don't worry about going back the way you came. Some people will make things difficult for you. Our Jinhuang Prefecture has a road that leads to Pine Needle Lake. The scenery is beautiful. If you want to go ashore, you don't have to worry about whether the ferry will be stolen by thieves. The lake monarch of Pine Needle Lake is the wife of our Jinhuang Prefecture's husband." Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." The old immortal who used the water spell to intercept the stream finally opened his eyes and sneered, "Little water ghost, talking nonsense. Are you tired of living?" The young general seemed to have changed his mind. He waved his hand and signaled the armored soldiers to let them pass. He said to the man in green, "You'd better not stay in Jinhuang Prefecture for too long. It's not a joke that the immortals will suffer when the immortals fight. As for touring Pine Needle Lake, you can do as you like." Chen Pinggan cupped his hands and thanked him. The young general nodded. Chen Pinggan walked on the path by the stream. The female ghost from Jinhuang Prefecture walked on the water surface with her skirt in one hand. At the pavilion, the old sea-viewing cultivator named Guarilwan walked to the door and sneered, "General Liu, you're easy to talk to. You let us pass just like that." The young man was called Liu Hui. He was only in his 20s and was already a 5th-grade general. Most importantly, he had the temporary identity of the 5 Mountains and Rivers Patrol Officer of the Northern Jin Prefecture. In other words, in the Northern Mountain and Rivers of the Northern Jin Prefecture, he could command all the mountain and rivers deities below the Mountain Lord. Every province, county, city god, civil and military temple was under his control. Liu Hui came from a large family in the Northern Jin Prefecture. However, he became a general by virtue of his military achievements. The reason was simple. His family had been destroyed in the catastrophe that destroyed a continent. In addition, it was rumored that the young man and the new emperor of Northern Jin met in times of trouble. There were also rumors that His Majesty's younger sister, who had married into another country, actually had a story with this young general. The young general looked indifferent. If we're not careful, we'll fall out with the Great Quan dynasty. If we fight, Immortal Guo might be easier to talk to than me. The old cultivator's face turned gloomy. He snorted and returned to the pavilion to continue cultivating. The Jinhuang Prefecture's mountain and rivers register had already been moved to the Great Quan dynasty. However, Jinhuang Prefecture was located in the undisputed territory of Northern Jin Prefecture. Therefore, if they didn't move, they would lose their status. Even if they quarreled with the sages of the Dafu Academy, the Great Quan dynasty and Jinhuang Prefecture would still be in the wrong. Currently, the more delicate matter was still the Pine Needle Lake, which had a surface of 800 miles. The ownership and division of this large lake were indeed debatable. The Emperor of Northern Jin's intention was clear. Jinhuang Prefecture had to move north. It would be best if they could take over the entire Pine Needle Lake. If the Great Quan dynasty bullied them, they would go to the academy to find the sages. The bottom line for Northern Jin was to divide the Pine Needle Lake into two. The Lake Lord water residents would only occupy a quarter of the lake. In fact, the two countries had been arguing about this for several years. The Great Quan dynasty and the imperial court were extremely tough, especially some young and strong officials and generals at the border. They were already clamoring for the Northern Jin dynasty to hear the sound of horse hooves. In the stream, the female ghost turned to look at the shore and smiled. "You look unfamiliar." Chen Pinggan smiled. "It's normal for you to find me unfamiliar. About 20 years ago, I passed by the Jinhuang Prefecture and happened to see His Excellency's wedding procession. Later on, I was fortunate enough to meet His Excellency. Back then, I didn't get to drink a cup of orchid wine. Now that I'm passing by your place, I want to make up for it." The female ghost was taken aback and immediately became suspicious. Back then, she was in the wedding procession of the mountain god. How could she not remember seeing this person? Chen Pinggan actually recognized her at first glance. He smiled. "Do you remember that there was a charcoal girl who accidentally violated the taboo of the mountains? Not only did you not care about it, but later on, when the mountain god's wife returned to the Jinhuang Prefecture, you were holding a lantern. After getting the permission of the old nanny, you even invited me to the wedding banquet. However, I was in a hurry and missed His Excellency's wedding banquet." Pei Qian held the mountain walking stick and smiled knowingly. The female ghost suddenly smiled. "It's you. Back then, you were still a young master. No wonder I didn't recognize you. Not everyone could meet the mountain god's wedding procession. Either he was sick with too little yang qi, or he was a cultivator who had left the mountain to cultivate." The female ghost sighed faintly in her heart. The man in front of her was most likely not an expert from the mountain. Otherwise, his appearance would have changed so much in just 20 years that she couldn't recognize him at all. Currently, the Jinhuang Prefecture and the Pine Needle Lake Lord's Prefecture were a family. The lord of the prefecture and his wife were more like a Daoist couple than the cultivator on the mountain. However, the two prefectures were still in troubled times. Otherwise, there wouldn't be people at Xingting who said that the mountains and rivers were sealed. An old immortal at the sea viewing realm was indeed extraordinary. However, under normal circumstances, he wouldn't dare to go against the Jinhuang Prefecture and the Lake Lord's Prefecture. In the end, it was better to lean against a big tree. His master and his wife were like that, and so was that old immortal. The problem was that his Jinhuang Prefecture wasn't in the Great Quan dynasty, but in the Northern Jin country. The female ghost reached out and touched her sleeve. Between her fingers, she pinched a black carp that was about an inch long. She gently breathed out at the small black carp and gave it a finishing touch. Then, she whispered a few words in her heart and threw it lightly. The fish swam into the water and disappeared with a wave of its tail. The black carp quickly rushed to the Jinhuang Prefecture's gatehouse. The mountain spirit elder didn't dare to delay and immediately reported the news. A man wearing a golden robe was the #1 mountain god in the northern Jin dynasty under the Five Mountains Lord, the lord of the Jinhuang prefecture, Zheng Su. After he received the Black Carp's secret letter, he immediately used a messenger flying sword given by the Great Quan dynasty to send a message to his wife, Liu Yorong, who was in charge of the Lake Lord's prefecture. If it wasn't for that passerby, a talisman and a sword would have intercepted and killed the Pine Needle Lake's perverted water god. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. However, Zheng Su didn't say much about this inside story except for his wife and a few confidants. Zheng Su walked to the gate today and patiently waited for the young immortal master who had helped the Jinhuang prefecture. A lord of the prefecture revealed a rare joyful expression in recent years. On the way to the Jinhuang prefecture, Pei Qian suddenly called out master while holding the mountain traveling staff. Chen Pinggan turned his head. "What's wrong?" Pei Qian grinned and didn't say anything. 7:56. Seeing the group of visitors, Excellency Jin Huang walked down the stairs and quickly walked forward. He clasped his hands and laughed loudly. "Zheng Su greets you, benefactor." Although his face had changed greatly from a young man in a white robe with a sword and a wine pot to an adult man in a long green robe, Zheng Su still recognized his identity at a glance. It was the young sword fairy that they met years ago. He never left his name and was very dissolute. Moreover, the man in front of Zheng Su still had the familiar red wine pot hanging on his waist, just like years ago. Chen Pinggan clasped his hands and returned the greeting. He smiled and said, "Sorry to bother you, Excellency." Zheng Su immediately turned around and Chen Pinggan extended his hand. Finally, the two walked side by side to the gate of Jin Huang Mansion. Zheng Su apologized in a low voice, "When I heard that you were here, I immediately sent a message to Pine Needle Lake. I didn't expect that my wife couldn't get away from something and couldn't rush back." Zheng Su actually felt strange. When they were waiting, Jinhuang Mansion actually received a message from the water god temple of Pine Needle Lake. It turned out to be a mysterious Great Spring consecrated immortal master who replied on behalf of Jinhuang Mansion. It wasn't even the work of his wife, Liu Yorong. This was too illogical. His wife would never leave the water mansion casually. If it were a normal day, Zheng Su would have already set off for Pine Needle Lake. Although his wife had a special status and was now the second-class river god of the Great Spring dynasty and the rightful lake lord of the entire Pine Needle Lake, his wife actually only had a golden body and cultivation equivalent to the cave realm. She was not good at fighting. In the past few years, she had braced herself to cultivate, which made Zheng Su, who had always been proficient in fighting, feel both amused and distressed. In the end, she told her not to force herself. It was in the past, now, and in the future. Chen Pinggan said telepathically, "I'm Cao Mo, from the Baoping continent. This is my second trip to the Tongya continent." This was the draft he had prepared on the way here. If it wasn't for the series of details that confirmed that Jinhuang Mansion had become a place of trouble, Chen Pinggan didn't mind being honest and telling Jinhuang Mansion his real name. Why would a mountain god excellency who could build a mansion need the help of the imperial court to pave an official road for incense worship? Why would he need to set up a boundary marker at the end of the bridge to show that this place belonged to the northern Jin kingdom? Moreover, the person who set up the monument wasn't a governor or a county magistrate. The person who set up the monument was the Mountain Water Division of the North Jin country. As for the abnormality in the pavilion, it was only to confirm Chen Pinggan's conjecture. The Liu family of Daquan should be the Yarrow family of Daquan now. Obviously, they wanted to use the final attribution of Jinhuang Prefecture and Pine Needle Prefecture as an opportunity to carry out a scheme with North Jin. Zheng Su laughed heartily and said, "Our Jinhuang Fu's orchid wine is a famous wine in the central region of the Tongyi continent. If you pass by Jinhuang Fu, you won't have to see Prefect Zheng, but you can't miss this orchid wine." After sitting down, Chen Pinggan felt a little awkward. Other than the master and disciple, there were 5 children. It was noisy like a group of people who came to Jinhuang Fu to eat and drink. Bai Xian, who acted like an old man, Nailan Yufan, who kept looking around, Yarrow Xiaoyan, who was afraid of strangers, He Ji Yu, who was young but tall, and Yu Xiehui, who was slightly cross-eyed and spoke frankly. There were 7 people in the group. One was a martial artist of the Peak State, and the other was a martial artist of the Peak State. 6.5 sword cultivators. Bai Xian and Nalan Yufan were both sword cultivators of the cave state. According to the rules of the mountain, the 2 children could be called Little Sword Celestials if they became sword cultivators of the middle 5 states at such a young age. To put it simply, if the old deity of the viewing sea state who held a horsetail whisk in the pavilion really wanted to fight, Bai Xian and Nalan Yufan only needed to join forces and each of them could defeat him with a flying sword. Zheng Su smiled and said, "I have asked the mansion to prepare food. It's all some wild game on the mountain and fresh fish from the Pine Needle Lake. In half an hour at most, we can drink orchid wine with Master Cow." This His Excellency naturally racked his brains. He could never imagine that this group of guests had already made Jin Huangfu full of sword cultivators. Chen Pinggan suddenly stood up and said, "My Excellency, please take me around." Zheng Su was a little surprised, but still followed the guest's wishes. She nodded and smiled, "It's my pleasure." Pei Qian stood up from the chair and said, "Master, I'll look after them." Chen Pinggan reminded her in the mind, "Remember to use your real name in Jin Huangfu. Don't use Zhang Qian." Pei Qian nodded. When Master Cao and the golden-robed His Excellency left the hall, Nalan Yufan jumped up and turned around. She touched the Ganoderma pattern on the back of the chair and said, "Sister Pei, what kind of wood is this chair made of? It looks expensive." Pei Qian returned to her seat and smiled, "I don't know, but it's definitely expensive. Remember not to touch the bottles and jars. They're all hundreds of years old. They're even more valuable." Nalan Yufan smiled and said, "If you accidentally break them, you can take Xiaoyan as compensation. You can stay here as a maid." Yarrow Xiaoyan sat obediently on the chair and said pitifully, "Sister Yufan, don't scare me." He Ji was the tallest of the 9-sword immortal embryos. He crossed his legs and swayed, "So Mountain God Fu is just like this. It's not even as good as Yunxian Peak and Huang Heji." Yu Xie, who was slightly cross-eyed, slid his body and leaned against the chair. He exhaled deeply and said, "Comfortable. I'll make a few chairs like this in the future." Bai Xian was just about to take off his boots and sit cross-legged on the chair. Pei Qian said, "Sit properly." Bai Xian rolled his eyes but still dismissed the idea. Even though Sister Pei's talent was average, she was Master Cao's first disciple. Pei Qian explained patiently, "There are many taboos in the water. When you're outside, you have to remember to do as the Romans do. We're guests, so we can't do as we please." Bai Xian leaned on the chair and sighed, "There are so many rules. So annoying." Pei Qian placed the walking stick on her knees and ignored Bai Xian's complaints. She closed her eyes to rest. Pei Qian really didn't think Bai Xian was that annoying. Whenever she thought back to her first trip, Pei Qian would feel that Bai Xian was already very quiet and sensible. However, no matter how annoying he was, it was no reason for Bai Xian to be left out of a certain book. Based on the current situation, before they returned to Luopo Mountain, Pei Qian would probably change a new book for Master Bai. However, Pei Qian was more curious about one thing. Why did her master and little senior purposely let Bai Xian misunderstand one thing and not point it out? Bai Xian seemed to have accepted his fate. Even though he had reached the cave-dwelling realm, Bai Xian seemed to be certain that he would be the one with the lowest potential in the future. The child trained with the sword and could endure hardships, but he didn't have high aspirations. However, according to her master and the White Goose's description of the 9 children's natal flying swords and Bai Xian's talent, Pei Qian didn't dare to say that Bai Xian would have the highest potential in the future, but he definitely wouldn't be low. In fact, Bai Xian had already vaguely become the leader of the 9 children. This kind of aura, from Pei Qian's perspective, was very important on the path of cultivation. Just like, when her master brought Sister Bao Ping, Li Huai, and the rest to study at the Great Sui Kingdom's Academy, her master was the one who naturally became everyone's protector. It was something that others would see as natural. If her master, Pei Qian, and little senior were not by her side, Bai Xian would immediately stand out. He would definitely be the one who would make the final decision in the chaotic situation. Pei Qian hesitated and used telepathy to speak only to Bai Xian Bai Xian, when you become successful with the sword, what do you want to do the most? Bai Xian glanced out of the corner of his eye and realized that Sister Pei was talking to him alone. He continued to lie down in languid and answered telepathically, I don't want to do anything. The only thing I want now is to meet that person of the same age as me from White Dragon Cave. If he happens to be alone at night, I'll stab him half to death and run away. I'll teach him a lesson, to come and go without a trace, to do good deeds without leaving a name. Pei Qian didn't want to continue talking. It was hard to talk to him. Perhaps this was also why her master didn't like to talk when she first took care of her. Pei Qian turned around and glanced at the 5 children. He Jiyu and Yu Xie Hui hit it off the most. They were whispering in each other's ears, saying that the female ghost sister in the pomegranate dress was quite pretty and wasn't scary at all. She was indeed prettier than Sister Pei. Naylan Yuji was staring blankly at several precious calligraphy and paintings in the lobby of Jinhuang Mansion. Yarou Xiaoyan was diligently nurturing her flying swords. Having 3 flying swords that were different from ordinary people always made Yarou Xiaoyan a little flustered and a little annoyed. Most importantly, Yarou Xiaoyan felt that she was too stupid and timid. She had too many flying swords and they were useless. Therefore, the young lady was worried that as she walked on the path of cultivation, she would become the most useless and annoying burden. Pei Qian whispered to Yarou Xiaoyan, Xiaoyan, when you're resting, you don't have to train so hard. Otherwise, you'll be very tired for the rest of your life. Listen to Sister Pei. In the future, when you're focused, focus on training. You can never be too focused. When you're relaxed, relax and play. Don't be afraid of others saying that you're slacking off. Yarou Xiaoyan heard this and immediately gathered her thoughts. She blushed slightly and quickly nodded lightly to Sister Pei. After Pei Qian finished speaking, he laughed involuntarily. He was a little self-deprecating. Was it because he had taken in our man as an unofficial disciple that he actually knew how to reason with others? He wondered if the little mute man would be able to get along with this bunch of children in the future. When Pei Qian thought of this matter, he was a little worried. After all, our man's identity was there. He was born as a mountain spirit and these sword immortal embryos came from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. It should be very difficult for them to get along. Forget it, there was no need to think too much. Anyway, Master was here. Bai Xian's natal flying sword was cloud travel. Once it was used, the flying sword was extremely fast. Moreover, it took the brutal path of exchanging injuries and even lives. Q-sword was like a chessboard. Bai Xian was extremely unreasonable. At the same time, it was very immortal. Naylan Yuji was the only sword immortal embryos among the 9 children who had 2 flying swords. One was Apricot Flower Sky and the other was Flower Lantern. Yarou Xiaoyan was the only sword immortal of the lower 5 realms who had 3 flying swords. Spring Shirt, Spider Web and Rainbow Dress. The natal powers of these 3 flying swords were extremely similar. They did not focus on offense but were good at defense. It could be seen as a little girl wearing 3 magic treasure robes at the same time. Naturally, they could naturally nourish the body and the soul of the sword immortal. Logically speaking, Yarou Xiaoyan was blessed by the heavens and should have broken through the realms the fastest. However, Yarou Xiaoyan's personality was relatively soft. On the path of cultivation, she was held back by her acquired temperament. He Gu's flying sword was Flying Peak. Yu Xie's flying sword was Shattering Token. Especially Bai Xian's natal flying sword. It was actually the most suitable for catching and killing. It could even be said that it was the best natal flying sword for sword immortals in Q-sword. This was also why Bai Xian had the catchphrases of please don't be left alone and if you have the ability to fight me one-on-one. However, ever since he entered Yuzizi to practice swordsmanship, until now, he was in Jinhuang Mansion in Tongyi State. Bai Xian had always thought that his talent in swordsmanship was the worst among the 9 children. It was very likely that he would be the one with the lowest achievements in the future because of his flying sword. It was not that the hidden official, who had been in the Summer Palace for many years, was purposely targeting a child like Bai Xian who did not even have the chance to enter the battlefield. It was just that the Great Wall of Sword Qi was a battlefield. Once a sword immortal was placed in a battlefield with enemies on all sides, even if Bai Xian succeeded in one strike, he would most likely need to retreat from the battlefield immediately. On the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the battle was intense. The number of sword immortals and demons attacking the city was too great. Bai Xian's natal flying sword was destined to be extremely unsuitable for leaving the city to fight. It could even be said that Bai Xian was born to be unsuitable for the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the former Great Wall of Sword Qi. Therefore, in the child's hometown, the ranking of Bai Xian's flying sword was only C according to the selection rules of the Summer Palace in the past. Moreover, in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Bai Xian possessed such a flying sword. Could it really allow this child to ascend to the Aurous Core stage, or even the nascent soul stage? Perhaps after a great battle, or at most a few great battles, his flying sword would have been destroyed. He would not even be able to become a sword immortal. In fact, the children who were brought back to the vast world by sword immortals from other places were all excellent potential sword immortals. For example, the two potential sword immortals, Zhu Xing and Chaomu, were brought back by the Snow Continent sword immortal Xie Songhua. Zhu Xing's Thunder Lake was rated as B mid-grade by the Summer Palace. As for Chaomu's two flying swords, Waterfall and Rainbow, they were rated as B low and C high respectively. Other than sword immortal Wu Chengpei's Sweet Dew, there were only a handful of A-grade flying swords. In fact, B-grade and C-grade flying swords were considered excellent in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. It was not only Zhu Xing and Chaomu who followed Xie Songhua. There were also Chen Li and Gao Yuqing who were brought away by Li Cai. All the potential sword immortals who left their hometowns earlier than Bai Xian and the rest had B-grade and C-grade flying swords. Therefore, when Bai Xian came to the vast world from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, as long as Bai Xian could reach the Aurous Core stage step by step after arriving at Luopa Mountain, he would be able to steadily increase the ranking of his flying sword. Bai Xian would be a sword immortal with great potential and killing power. Pei Qian looked forward to these children's cultivation at Luopa Mountain. Zheng Su brought Chen Pinggan to stroll around Jinhuang Manor. They passed by an ancient thatched pavilion. The surroundings were lush with lush green clouds and pine trees. As they chatted along the way, Chen Pinggan went straight to the point. "Prefect Lord, our visit today is a little untimely." Zheng Su did not hide anything and said frankly, "Immortal Master Cao, to be honest, my Jinhuang Manor is not a suitable place to receive guests. I believe you have already noticed when you passed by the pavilion. After we drink, I'll get someone to bring you on a boat tour of Pine Needle Lake. It's my duty, so it's inconvenient for me to divulge any insider information. I originally wanted to drink some wine first before saying such unpleasant words to my benefactor." Chen Pinggan nodded and said with a smile, "All right. It's better to be of no help than to be a hindrance." Zheng Su heaved a sigh of relief. That was for the best. Jinhuang Manor had no reason to involve this benefactor of theirs in the treacherous situation of the two countries. It was enough for them to drink and part on good terms. She believed that they would have another chance to drink and reminisce in the future. Chen Pinggan and Zheng Su entered the thatched pavilion and sat down. Chen Pinggan asked, "What about the body of old General Yarrow?" Zheng Su sighed. This was not a secret at all. Everyone knew about it. There was no taboo. Before I left Mirage City, I paid a special visit to old General Yarrow. At that time, old General Yarrow was already unable to get out of bed. He must have been holding on even harder these years. Chen Pinggan added, "If I remember correctly, Caomu Nunnery is the #1 immortal in Great Spring. Immortal Master Shu is not only good at thunder, but also a medical expert who is proficient in alchemy. The elixirs he refines seem to be able to prolong one's life." In fact, Immortal Master Shu Tong of Caomu Nunnery had already died under the sword of Sui Yushin. However, with the status of the Great Spring Dynasty in Tongye Continent and the identity of the Yarrow family, no matter who the female emperor of Great Spring asked for medicine, she would not be refused. The location of the Alliance of Peach Leaves was only a few steps away from Mirage City at the Peach Leaves Ferry. Zheng Su shook her head and said, "Immortal Master Cao, you don't know that Caomu Nunnery is already a thing of the past in Great Spring. This immortal mansion has been passed down from generation to generation. In the early years, the previous owner, Shu Tong, suddenly went into seclusion and gave the position to his son. Later, when the disaster came, Tsaomu Nunnery secretly colluded with the beasts of the monster clan and almost opened the great city protecting array for the cultivators of Tsaomu Nunnery. Therefore, the elixirs of Tsaomu Nunnery have been lost for a long time. It's not worth mentioning that the elixirs of Tsaomu Nunnery have been lost. Over the years, for the sake of old General Yarrow, His Majesty has asked everywhere for medicine. Not to mention the Golden Peak Temple, His Majesty even sent people to the Divine Seal Peak of the Jade sect to ask for a rare elixir from Sect Master Wei. It is said that His Majesty has even sent people to cross continents to find old immortal Lu of the Green Tiger Palace in the Baopian continent. Zheng Su saw that Cao Mo looked calm. She most likely heard about the Yarrow family's border cavalry when she was traveling north in Tongye continent. Zheng Su was most grateful to the Yarrow family for the reason that Jin Huang Mansion could rise again, so she couldn't help but say a few more words. She sincerely sighed and said, "Immortal Master Cao should also understand that whether it is an ordinary person or a pure martial artist, the so-called elixirs of Immortal Mansion have limited effects and are inevitably harmful. Usually, medicinal cuisine used to strengthen one's foundation is fine, but when it comes to treating a disease and saving a life, if you are not careful, you will end up treating the symptoms and damaging the root. Therefore, for old General Yarrow's health, let me put it bluntly, his time is up and he is about to pass away." However, old General Yarrow was able to endure to this age, close to 100 years old. Now that the Great Quan dynasty is flourishing, it will definitely rise to become one of the strongest dynasties in Tongye continent. Old General Yarrow can be considered to have died of old age, so I don't think he will have too many regrets. In fact, for a god of mountains and rivers who had lived for a long time and established a mansion, she was already used to seeing life and death in the mortal world. If it wasn't for her affection for the Yarrow family of the Great Quan dynasty, Zheng Su wouldn't be so sad. Chen Pinggan clenched his fists on his knees and gently released them. He nodded and asked, looking at the Northern Jin dynasty's posture of first erecting a monument and then blocking the road, "Are they determined to urge His Excellency to move north? What is your great Spring Emperor's intention? Won't it be too difficult for His Excellency?" As long as the Jin Huang residence was moved north, Zheng Su wouldn't be in a difficult position. What was really difficult was that the Great Quan Imperial Court was determined to let the Jin Huang residence stay where it was. Zheng Su sighed in her heart and said vaguely, "Regardless of what the Emperor decides, it is the duty of us gods of mountains and rivers to be loyal to the Emperor. We just have to do it." Chen Pinggan said, "It is reasonable for the Great Quan dynasty and the Northern Jin dynasty to split the Pine Needle Lake in half." Zheng Su looked helpless. It would be great if both sides discussed it this way. The Northern Jin dynasty was weak and wasn't willing to give in. They insisted on moving the entire Jin Huang residence to the north of the old border of the Great Quan dynasty. As for the stronger Great Quan dynasty, they wouldn't be so easy to talk to. From the Dukshan's residence in the capital to the generals of the Great Quan border army, everyone in the imperial court was extremely determined on this matter. Especially Sir Shao, who was in charge of this matter, felt that moving the Jin Huang residence to the north was already a big concession and giving the Northern Jin dynasty a lot of face by keeping it on a mountain at the south end of the Pine Needle Lake. Zheng Su went to the Pine Needle Lake secretly a few times to accompany them to the border discussions. From what Sir Shao said, it seemed that as long as the Northern Jin dynasty was greedy and dared to push their luck, they wouldn't even have to move the Jin Huang residence, let alone part of the Pine Needle Lake. Or they could just move it to the south. The Northern Jin dynasty was originally weaker than the Great Quan dynasty. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been suppressed by the Yarrow family's troops. The current Northern Jin dynasty was even weaker. It was an empty shell that was pieced together. Even the 6 yamen where the country's core was located were old. They were all very old and couldn't see clearly. They couldn't even walk steadily. The younger ones were even younger, but they were promoted quickly. If the imperial court in the capital was like this, then there was no need to talk about the big and small armies. There were all kinds of people and local officials everywhere. In the beginning, Zheng Su of the Jinhuang residence was naturally overjoyed when his wife was promoted to the position of the water god of the Pine Needle Lake. She built a golden body, built a temple, and became the ruler of a lake. Now, it made Zheng Su very worried. Indeed, she had underestimated the emperor's means of controlling people. However, it wasn't appropriate to say more about these inside stories. It didn't conform to the rules of officialdom, and there was also the suspicion of taking advantage of others. Since the Great Quan dynasty treated the Jinhuang residents so well, Zheng Su had no reason to shirk away no matter what decision the emperor made. Therefore, Zheng Su smiled and shook her head. I won't talk about this with my benefactor. This His Excellency was still worried about implicating Cao Mo. If it was only the kind of dispute between the great Dao and the water god of the Pine Needle Lake and did not involve the imperial court and border situation of the two countries, Zheng Su felt that she and this sword immortal Cao were like-minded. She really didn't mind him lending a helping hand to the Jinhuang residents. After all, if they won, they would drink and celebrate. Zheng Su believed that there would be a time when the Jinhuang residents would repay the favor. Even if they lost, it wouldn't make a young sword immortal stagnate and sink into the mud. After all, this young man was the most difficult swordsman to deal with on the mountain. When seeking revenge, there was rarely any overnight feud. It was not a boast that a swordsman could break all rules with one sword. Even if he couldn't kill with one sword, after 2 or 3 sword strikes, he would immediately escape with his sword and come back again. How could he guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Was it possible for an immortal sect to seal off the mountain? Not to mention the disciples going down the mountain to travel. However, if a chi cultivator wanted to seek revenge with a swordsman, it would be very troublesome. Swordsmen rarely cultivated in the mountains. Every mountain had a deep background and there were even more sword immortal ancestors. Chen Pinggan said apologetically, I didn't go down the mountain for much experience. At most, I know the rules of the mountains. I don't know the rules of the officialdom. I shouldn't have asked. Zheng Su stood up and smiled, don't think too much. Let's drink. There's nothing in the world that can't be settled with a pot of orchid wine. Immortal Cao, drink as many pots as you can. If you can't finish 3 pots, bring a few more along for the journey. However, I think Immortal Cao doesn't look like someone who doesn't know how to drink. It's just 3 pots. It's nothing. His Excellency Jin Huang didn't know that he had met a well-deserved senior expert when it came to persuading him to drink. However, Chen Pinggan suddenly said, My Excellency, I might have to leave the wine for now. I have something urgent to attend to and need to travel for 2 or 3 days. It's hard to say how long it will take. I'll rush back to Jin Huang Mansion as soon as possible. Zheng Su was stunned and didn't think too much about it. However, she wasn't sure if the children brought by Cao Mo should stay in the mansion or go to Pine Needle Lake. Of course, the latter was more appropriate and stable. However, if she did so, she would be suspected of driving them away. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, My disciple Pei Qian and a few other children can stay in the mansion. I'll try to come back as soon as possible. Zheng Su nodded in agreement. Even though it was the border between De Quan and North Jin Kingdom and there were undercurrents, the Jinhuang Mountain Mansion and the Songzhen Water Mansion were connected by mountains and rivers. There were also 2 hidden De Quan consecrators. Even if something happened, they would be able to protect a group of foreign children. After all, regardless of the disparity in power between De Quan and North Jin, they had to firmly adhere to the principle of righteousness. Otherwise, they would lose reason with the Academy of Fu. As long as they lost the support of the Academy, everything would be over. Chen Pinggan walked out of the thatched pavilion and bid farewell to Zheng Su. He tiptoed and his figure rose from the ground. In a flash, he disappeared silently. Zheng Su was shocked. She was the Excellency of Earth Mountain. Not to mention the nearby ripples of spiritual qi, even the flow of qi of mountains and rivers within 100 miles was under her control. Cao Mo's departure wasn't caused by an Earth immortal. If it weren't for the dust floating on the ground outside the pavilion, Zheng Su would have mistaken it for the art of concealment of a great cultivator in the upper 5 states. Chen Pinggan went to the ferry first. Kui Dongshan shook his head. The answer was simple, no. Although he knew the answer, Chen Pinggan still felt a little sad. Indeed, when cultivating, one had to be careful and think of what if at the same time. After asking Kui Dongshan to take care of Jinhuang Mansion, Chen Pinggan stomped on the ground and left the ferry in an instant. He rode the wind and traveled to Mirage City of Great Spring alone. He was as fast as lightning, but he still concealed his astonishing aura that was supposed to be like a rainbow. Since it was the master's order, Kui Dongshan sat on the railing obediently and stared at Jinhuang Mansion and the Pine Needle Lake in the immortal's vision. Kui Dongshan took out a folding fan and looked down at the earth. He casually performed the Qi observation spell. In his eyes, although it was daytime in the human world, lanterns of different sizes lit up as if they had received an edict. Some of them were swaying and were extremely blurry. Some of them were as small as mustard seeds and seemed to be extinguished by the mountain wind. Some of them were condensed and were as big as a fist. For example, the young military general of the Northern Jin Kingdom at the pavilion was unexpectedly a son of a general with martial arts fate. He also had a lot of entanglements with the Northern Jin Kingdom's emperor and the emperor of the kingdom. Therefore, as long as he didn't meet with any unexpected mishaps, he was destined to be a minister who supported the emperor of the Northern Jin Kingdom. The so-called accident was like a flood dragon entering the pond and setting off huge waves. Instead of avoiding it, it would be difficult for him to survive if he bumped into it head-on. However, judging from the young man's behavior when he met his master and senior sister, he didn't seem like a short-lived person who would die young because he cherished his fortune. On the contrary, the old immortal of the viewing sea state in the pavilion was more like a person who walked too freely and didn't want to live too long. As for His Excellency Jin Huang, who was like a golden lantern in Kui Dongshan's eyes, it was because of the golden body deity position, and the mountain deity had moved the landscape register to the Great Spring Mirage City. Therefore, he was connected to the Great Spring Kingdom's emperor. Kui Dongshan's eyes lit up. He jumped up and stood on the railing shakily. He slowly walked to the bow of the ship and squinted his eyes to look. His line of sight moved from the Jinhuang Mansion to the Pine Needle Lake and then to the border between the two kingdoms. Finally, it stopped at a place. Oh, what a strong dragon chi. No wonder he felt something was wrong before. There was actually a cultivator of the Jade Raw realm helping to cover it up. Nowadays, in the Tongyi continent, cultivators of the upper 5 realms were rarely seen. Most of them were little bastards of the Earth Immortal realm stirring up trouble. Could it be that the Great Spring Queen was patrolling the border? As expected, the communication between the Jinhuang Mansion and the Pine Needle Lake by flying sword was not reasonable. They should not have let a cultivator of the Jindan talisman to reply on behalf of them. It turned out that the water deity had left the territory under the order to secretly meet the emperor. As for intercepting the flying sword and peeking at the secret letter, there was no such thing. Kui Dongshan withdrew his line of sight and moved to the south because there was a group of carriages coming from afar. There was a sword cultivator of the Jindan realm in the carriage. There was also an official in the nearby carriage. There was no doubt that he came from the Yamen of the Ministry of Rites of the North Jin Kingdom. If he was not a talented and outstanding scholar, he should be the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites. If his official rank was too high, it would make the emperor of the North Jin Kingdom look weak. If his official rank was too low, it would be a slap to the face of the Great Spring Imperial Court. Therefore, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rites, who was in charge of the landscape register of the country, came to discuss the relocation of the Jinhuang Mansion and the Pine Needle Mansion. However, the North Jin Kingdom did not expect the Great Spring Imperial Court to be so determined that even the emperor had personally come to the border of the two countries. Therefore, it was inevitable that they would be at a disadvantage. Kui Dongshan gently waved his fan with a playful expression. It seemed that teacher and senior sister had met the Great Spring Queen in the past and had a good relationship. Moreover, Kui Dongshan knew from chatting with Xiaomi that in Pei Qian's eyes, Sister Yarrow is very generous to me. However, Pei Qian's words had to be at least 20% off. After all, Pei Qian had accidentally mentioned it to a fairy sister from the North Continent named Sui Jingcheng when they were hanging out together when he was a child. If there were no exceptions, After Pei Qian received Sui Jingqing's gift, he would definitely add a sentence at the end, something like, "That Miss Yarrow is generous, and she's really pretty, but she's not as pretty as Sister Sui. I swear to God." It was not difficult to guess. The truth must be more or less like that. That was why eldest senior sister, who hadn't grown up yet, was so quick-witted. It was like a swoosh, a random jump. What else could she do? After landing, she grew up. At the Jin Huang residence, the banquet was still as usual. Pei Qian did not say anything about his teacher's sudden departure. He brought a group of children to eat and drink. He could only try his best to make Bai Xian and He Jiu eat better. Zheng Su asked the young lady named Pei Qian if she knew how to drink. Pei Qian acted as if she was facing a great enemy and quickly said that she did not know how to drink and had never drunk wine before. Zheng Su did not know how to persuade a young lady to drink. She could only drink alone and drink a few cups of orchid wine. When Pei Qian suddenly lowered her head and picked up a dish with her chopsticks, she frowned. Zheng Su also looked a little unhappy. It wasn't because the children at the table were making a ruckus. In fact, it was very quiet. It was because Zheng Su noticed that there was a group of uninvited guests outside Jin Huang Manor. Zheng Su didn't expect them to come, but she didn't expect them to come so quickly. The key was that there was an earth immortal from the North Jin Kingdom. Although he did not show up in the carriage, his sword aura was strong and aggressive. It was obvious that he was going to attack the Jin Huang residence if there was a disagreement. Zheng Su was distracted by the commotion outside the residence, so she did not notice that the two children named Bai Xian and Nalan Yuji were the first to look at each other. Then, all the children stopped eating. Pei Qian telepathically said to all the children, "Eat." Only then did the 5-sword immortal embryos continue eating. Bai Xian asked telepathically, "Sister Pei, someone is here to cause trouble. We can't eat a meal for free, can we?" Pei Qian laughed, "That is a golden core sword immortal. Even if you all come together, you are not enough." Bai Xian was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Here, a golden core sword immortal is so arrogant. Who are you trying to scare?" In Master Cao's wine shop, not to mention golden core and nascent soul, even sword immortals of the upper 5 realms would not have a seat if they were late. Who doesn't squat by the roadside and drink? If they want to eat an extra dish of pickled vegetables, they would have to beg the shop assistant for a long time. They might not even get it. Pei Qian was speechless. She could not say that in some continents in the vast world, a golden core sword immortal was a sword immortal, right? In Bai Xian's hometown, it seemed that in addition to the Ascendant Realm and Immortal Realm, even the Jade Realm sword immortals were called sword immortals on the road. Pei Qian looked at these children with gentle eyes and telepathically said to them again, "Eat. You can eat in peace and don't worry about anything. The master is not here, but the disciple is. I can also take care of you children who are away from home." 757. How young they were. How young they were. How young they were. The sloppy man, Yarrow Xianji. The woman with the sword, Yarrow Lingji. When they first met, one was still a young man with a bright smile, and the other was still a young girl with a sharp aura. Yarrow Xianji seemed a little shy. Her lips moved slightly, but she couldn't say anything suitable. She didn't want to say anything polite, but she didn't know where to start. In the end, she just kept silent. Yarrow Lingji was the daughter of Hu-Er town in Zhejiang. She was more straightforward. It seemed that even after so many years of training, she still couldn't erase the edges of her personality. She looked at the man and nodded with a smile. "Young Master Chen, it's indeed been a long time." Chen Pinggan asked, "Can you bring me to see old General Yarrow?" Yarrow Xianji nodded. Yarrow Lingji noticed that the surroundings of the Yarrow residence were strange. It seemed that Chen Pinggan's arrival had caused a lot of commotion. It was normal. The Yarrow residence was no longer the minister residence of the past. The emperor wasn't in Mirage City now, and someone had barged in. Chen Pinggan said apologetically, "I came in a hurry, so I'll probably need your help to explain. Just say that someone is visiting the Yarrow residence and tell Mirage City not to be nervous. As for who I am, there's no need to say. Yarrow Lingji didn't hesitate and went to do it personally. She let her brother Yarrow Xianji bring Chen Pinggan to visit their grandfather. Yarrow Xianji walked with a limp, and there was an empty sleeve. The man wanted to hide it, but it was futile. Chen Pinggan smiled and asked, "You seem to be quarreling with your sister just now? What were you quarreling about?" Yarrow Xianji said softly, "The older my sister gets, the more long-winded she gets. She always wants me to find a wife. She's addicted to being a matchmaker and talking nonsense. It's not like she doesn't know what kind of person I am now. Even if a girl agrees to this marriage, what is she after? I'm not stupid. It can't be that she wants me to be young, promising, and handsome, right? Mr. Chen, don't you think so?" Chen Pinggan nodded. "It's normal. It's normal to persuade and annoy. That is, unless you meet a girl you like one day, and then marry her. Before that, you should just stay put. There's no solution." Yarrow Xianji smiled. "Mr. Chen, I look much older than you now." Chen Pinggan lightly slapped Yarrow Xianji's head. "Apart from looking old, he's also famous and has quite a temper. He can even fight with the White Dragon Cave's register master in the downtown area." Yarrow Xianji laughed after being slapped. To the current Duke Yarrow, laughing without drinking was a very rare thing. In a secluded courtyard, there were 2 painted door gods as tall as a person pasted on the courtyard door. They had already revealed their golden bodies and were guarding the door. This is not an ordinary divinity show. The 2 golden-bodied door gods in front of them carry the luck of the civil and military officials of the Great Spring Country. This can be regarded as the emperor's private gain under the guise of public office. However, this move is reasonable. This is because the person who helped the door gods paint is a country's Qintianjian. He is holding the standard handwriting of the emperor himself. Every stroke is within the rules. Chen Pinggan could tell that the person who added the finishing touch to the 2 door gods was a personal handwriting of a certain academy's headmaster. It was the Confucian sage's advice. Obviously, the Confucian school has a whole new level of respect for the Yarrow family of the Great Spring Country, from the Confucian temple to the Academy of the First Continent. From then on, the 2 door gods that appeared at the courtyard door would be connected to the Great Spring Country's fate. They would be soaked in the incense of the mortal world for hundreds or thousands of years. It was the most common type of painting on the path of Shinto. Previously, Chen Pinggan had already sensed the abnormality of this place. He could conclude that the old General Yarrow Zhen was recuperating here. The reason why he did not directly land here was because it would be too rash. He was worried that his sword chi and fist will had not completely retracted. If he was too aggressive, he would offend the old general's fate. Moreover, Chen Pinggan also wanted to calm down his state of mind by the brother and sister's side. The 2 door gods looked at the green-robed man with rapt attention. Then, they cupped their fists and bowed at almost the same time. They looked respectful and took the initiative to make way for Chen Pinggan. Yarrow Xianji was stunned. He thought that he would have to explain a little more before Mr. Chen could pass through the restriction. Chen Pinggan cupped his fists and bowed back. He followed Yarrow Xianji into a room. There was a celestial incense burner on the table in the room. Purple smoke rose and the fragrance was pleasant. An old man with snow-white hair and beard was lying on the sickbed. His breathing was extremely soft. Yarrow Xianji's movements were extremely gentle. He helped Chen Pinggan move a chair to the side of the bed, while he himself sat far away. Before Chen Pinggan sat down, he took out several golden talisman from his sleeve and pasted them one by one on the door and window of the room. They were the top-grade talisman recorded in the true alchemy works. One of them was called the Fairy Talisman. It could calm the mind and soul and reduce the influence of the long river of time. However, this talisman consumed a lot of talisman paper. The key point was that refining this talisman consumed a lot of the cultivator's mental strength. In fact, it was far more than drawing the offensive talisman. Other than the Fairy Talisman, there was also an almost lost ox and horse temporary rest talisman on the door. It could not stop the ox and horse from coming to the door, but it could allow the Yin underworld messenger to see the divine talisman from afar and temporarily rest for a while. It was a mysterious and ancient ritual. This kind of custom was destined to not be recorded in the celestial books that were hidden at the top of the word sect. Yin and Yang had different paths and each went their own way. It was the same principle as birds had their own paths and mice had their own paths. If a cultivator did not open the third eye or enter the upper 5 states, it was not strange to meet the city god or the earth god. A cultivator who went down the mountain was like a celestial being who came down to the earth to ask about the land. It was even an unwritten rule in the officialdom. However, it was extremely difficult to meet the Yin underworld messenger who was completely different from the wandering celestial beings. It was almost as difficult as a mortal teacher meeting an otherworldly item. Moreover, if they met by chance, Qi cultivators would not see it as a good thing. According to the obscure records of the Summer Palace, people, regardless of whether they were cultivators or not, and the Fengju messenger of ghost, were considered to be walking on 2 sides of the long river of time. Both sides had their own Tao of heaven and earth and did not interfere with each other. Therefore, Chen Pinggan had traveled a lot. Other than Zhong Kuei, who had increased his knowledge outside the Burial River Temple, he had not met any other Fengju messenger of ghost. Moreover, the unconventional meeting was because Chen Pinggan was used to the stagnant relationship of the long river of time that he could see the rare appearance of the Fengju messenger of ghost. Otherwise, even if both sides were close to each other, they would have brushed past each other. After so many years of traveling, Chen Pinggan had already used up all the golden talisman papers in his collection, whether he drew talismans or gave them away. These few rare talisman papers used to draw talismans had been temporarily borrowed from Kui Dongshan on the cloudboat ferry earlier. Drawing the crossing of time talisman would wear down a cultivator's mind. Drawing the ox and horse temporary rest talisman would reduce one's merit. These taboos were clearly written on the true alchemy works. Li Shishing had specially written 4 words beside the ox and horse talisman: use this talisman with caution. Yarrow Xianji sat on the chair and watched Mr. Chen post the golden talisman papers one by one. Although he was curious, he did not ask. Apart from his curiosity, the man felt at ease for no reason. It seemed that Mr. Chen had finally arrived. Then, he, the Prince of Grand Spring, who had been reduced to a useless person, could slack off when it came to matters of effort, not to mention the matters at hand. Anyway, he would let Mr. Chen work hard. In the past, Yarrow Xianji was one of the 3 young Yarrows at the border of Grand Spring. He admired the young sword deity who had the demeanor of a grandmaster the most. Back then, he had wanted to be apprenticed to Mr. Chen, who was unparalleled in fist techniques. Unfortunately, he did not succeed. At that time, he thought that there would be many opportunities in the future, so he was not in a hurry. Even if the time on the mountain had little to do with the weather of the mortal world, they would meet again after 10 years. Unexpectedly, 2 decades had passed in the blink of an eye. Moreover, Yarrow Xianji had no intention of practicing his fist techniques. Yarrow Xianji was not a Qi cultivator, but he could tell that the golden talisman papers were priceless. Every time the immortal masters who served Grand Spring's imperial court used talisman papers made of such materials for the country, they would look as if their flesh was being cut off. It was to let the imperial court know that they had given their all. After Chen Pinggan posted the talisman papers, he quietly walked to the side of the table. He reached out his palm to the incense burner and gently brushed it. He sniffed the fragrance and nodded. It was indeed the work of an expert. The amount of incense was just right. After doing all that, Chen Pinggan sat on the chair that was closest to the bed. Other than the ferry talisman and the ox and horse talisman, the other talisman papers were relatively ordinary. They were all used to help old General Yarrow condense his qi and slightly slow down the process of his mental exhaustion and the decay of his skin. For example, the sweet dew earth connecting talisman was used to quietly nourish the old man's body with a wisp of water and soil qi. It only treated the symptoms but not the root cause. That was the only way. Nowadays, for the old people, even for immortals like Kui Dongshan, any kind of mysterious Dharma spell or supernatural power would be a huge loss. Yarrow Xianji did not have any doubts from the beginning to the end. He believed that even if His Majesty the Emperor was here, it would be the same. It was rare for the Yarrow family to trust an outsider so much. It was true in the past and even more so now. Chen Pinggan was the only exception. The man just quietly looked at Mr. Chen, who came a little late. Although no one had heard the reason why his grandfather was so stubborn, the younger generation of the three Yarrows, His Majesty the Emperor Yarrow Jinji, and the martial arts masters Yarrow Lingji and Yarrow Xianji all knew the reason. Grandfather hoped that in this life, he would be able to see his young benefactor again. Other than that, there was nothing else that his grandfather couldn't let go of. The Dequan Kingdom was preserved, and even the Mirage City was intact. Every winter, it would snow heavily, and the capital would still be the beautiful scenery of the Glaze Wonderland. In the Tongyi continent where the mountains and rivers were shattered, such a lucky thing was unique in the Dequan Kingdom. After Chen Pinggan sat down, he gently rubbed his palms together. Then, he reached out and gently held one of the old man's withered palms, rubbing his palms together to warm them up a little. A martial artist who had reached the ultimate level did not need to do such superfluous actions to be able to control the temperature of his hands. However, this was a subconscious action of Chen Pinggan. After a while, the old man's eyelids moved, but he did not open them. He said hoarsely, "You're here, really? Could it be that Jinji is deliberately fooling me? Who are you?" "It's me, Chen Pinggan." Chen Pinggan leaned forward, grabbing old General Yarrow's hand with both hands. He bent down and said softly, "So many years have passed, but I still think about the time when I was walking by the burial river with Grandfather Yarrow. We met an old farmer who occasionally fished up corpses. The old man said that his son had fished up someone who shouldn't have been fished up, so in a few days, his son was gone. The old man finally said, I should have stopped him. I have always wondered whether it was because too much time had passed that the old man was not so sad when he talked about this matter with us outsiders, or whether there was some other reason that persuaded the old man to not be so sad. Or is it that when ordinary people live their lives, some heart-wrenching sad things fall into the pit of the world? When people fall, they have to get up and continue to move forward. When sad things fall, they can't get up. When people get through it, the matter is over. According to the customs of Chen Pinggan's hometown, there was no need to avoid talking about life and death when talking to old people who were healthy. The old man murmured, "Sure enough, little Pinggan is here. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to talk about these old things. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't think about these things." Chen Pinggan said softly, "I've made Grandfather Yarrow wait for a long time. However, to be honest, it wasn't easy for me to come here. Some things come without waiting for me to be prepared. It seems to rush to me without any discussion, and I can only endure it. At the same time, some things have to go, and I can't stop them no matter how hard I try. I can only endure it and can't say anything to others. If I don't talk about the grievances in my heart, it would be unreasonable to talk about it. Therefore, I want to find an elder to complain about it. I came from Jinhuang Fu to see Grandfather Yarrow. I must listen to a few more words. Back then, I was in a hurry to get home. This time, I don't have to rush home." The old man tried his best to open his eyes. His vision was blurry, but he could vaguely see a man who was no longer a teenager. He was still wearing a jade hairpin on his head. After coughing a few times, the old man's face actually gained some vigor. "That's right, the true Buddha only talks about ordinary things. He's still the Chen Pinggan I know, but he's grown up a lot. When he was young, he suffered hardships. Either he yelled with all his might, wishing that everyone in the world could hear him, or he liked to keep everything to himself. I always felt that after a few more days, or a few more years, it wouldn't be a problem anymore." Chen Pinggan nodded. The old man raised a hand and gently patted the back of the young man's hand. "The Yarrow family has some difficulties now. It's not about whether the world is good or bad, but about the principles. That's what makes it more difficult. For me, it's all a knot in my heart. Whether you come or not, whether you can solve the problem or not, it doesn't matter. For example, you can change your path and make Yarrow Zhen, who is already very old, even more old. You can become a god of mountains and rivers, but you can't do it." "Little Pinggan?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "I can understand. The Great Spring was able to support the mountain lord of Jinhuang Prefecture, Zhengsu, and the Pine Needle Lake's water deity, Liu Yorong. Zhengsu's deity position was second only to the 5 mountains of the Great Spring. Liu Yorong was also a second-class river deity. Her deity position was second only to the buried river deity of the Azure Palace. This was the so-called when a man achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. And this person was, of course, Yarrow Jinji, the Great Spring's empress. Therefore, it wouldn't be difficult for old General Yarrow, who had enough merits and won the hearts of the people, to become the mountain lord of the 5 mountains of the Great Spring Yarrow family, let alone the capital city god. However, in this vast world, it wasn't that there weren't any women who claimed the title of empress, but it could be counted on one's fingers. Moreover, the reign of the empress usually didn't last long. In times of chaos, whoever sat on the throne and wore a dragon robe was responsible. To be able to sit on the throne was even more of a skill. But when peace came, how could it be smooth for a woman to ascend the throne? Except for the previous emperor who lost the hearts of the people, the Great Spring Liu family had been established for more than 200 years. In fact, the other emperors of the Great Spring Liu family were all wise emperors. Almost none of them were fatuous. This meant that the Liu family still had the surname of the Great Spring, whether in the palace, on the mountain, in the Jianghu, or among the people. Therefore, old General Yarrow's choice of whether to become a god of mountains and rivers was actually a choice in the old man's heart, whether to change the surname of the Great Spring Kingdom from Liu to Yao. Obviously, the old man wanted to return the Great Spring to the Liu family. And on this matter, it was very likely that old General Yarrow Zhen and his granddaughter, the current Empress Yarrow Jinji, would have some kind of disagreement. It could even be said that old General Yarrow's thoughts would run counter to the hopes of the entire Yarrow family, especially the youngest one. Yarrow Xianji didn't know whether she should be happy or sad. Today, her grandfather was very energetic, so much so that he had the strength and spirit to speak a lot. He spoke more than he had in the past 6 months combined. Chen Pinggan suddenly turned his head and said to Yarrow Xianji, "Go and call your elder sisters over. Both of them should come." Yarrow Xianji had a bitter expression. His Majesty the Emperor is not in Mirage City right now. He went to the Yarrow family's old mansion in the southern border. Chen Pinggan froze on the spot. With the help of Chen Pinggan, the old man slowly sat up. He even had a smile on his face as he joked, "Is it because I didn't discuss it with you? That's right, this is life." Just sitting up made old General Yarrow tired. He could only move his fingers slightly as a gesture to signal Chen Pinggan not to think too much. The funeral has already been arranged. The children of the Yarrow family are all used to life and death. Who doesn't need to be too pretentious? There are so many people who die on the battlefield at such a young age. It doesn't make sense that someone who has lived to my age would leave such a big and messy house. If they cry, I'll find it noisy. If I don't cry, I'll seem unfilial. What do you think? Chen Pinggan asked. What can I do? Old General Yarrow smiled. You don't need to do anything. As long as you don't leave without any news, it will be fine. Even if we are separated by an entire continent, we can still use flying swords to communicate. Don't meddle in the affairs of the Yarrow family and the Great Spring Kingdom. Do you really think you are our Yarrow family's son-in-law? What were you doing all those years ago? If you didn't pretend to be a fool back then and were willing to take a step or two, perhaps, forget it. Yarrow Xianji secretly grinned. If this matter were to be spread out, it would make the court and the commoners question it as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Those private engraved books that could not be stopped despite repeated prohibitions, the endless stream of unofficial histories of the officials, and the erotic books of the palace would probably make even more money. And these books that damaged the foundation of the imperial court and the reputation of the Yarrow family were often pushed by those scholars who lived in seclusion. Before his sister, Yarrow Jinji, had become emperor, these books with unsightly contents had long been popular in the court. After becoming emperor, they could only be said to have been slightly restrained. However, they were still like weeds in the spring breeze. Every time the government banned one, another would pop up. Now, there were even many feudal officials and local officials who would secretly keep a few books. However, the emperor could not attend to these matters for the time being. There were many things to attend to in the military and the country, and they all needed to be reorganized. Just the matter of reforming the military system and setting up a total of 86 generals within a country's borders was enough to stir up a storm and cause much criticism. As for the selection of the 24 founding contributions, there was even more resistance. The civil and military officials who had enough military service to be selected had to fight for a place. Those who did not have enough could not help but harbor resentment. They also thought about how the emperor could change the 24 generals to 36 generals. Those who could not even make the 36 generals were not chosen. The civil officials thought about how the court could set up a few more guadukes. The military officials changed their minds and began to pick and choose among the 86 stationed troops. All of them wanted to be generals on the border with northern Jin and southern Qi. They wanted to have more military power and more soldiers in their hands. There were the 6 generals of Hua Road in the south, who had the potential to start another war on the border, and the 5 generals of Mei Road, who were destined to be in charge of water transport. These were all first-class delicious cakes. Furthermore, the emperor seemed to be hesitant about whether or not to use an iron fist to control the unofficial histories. If he was not careful, the new emperor would be unkind and be cursed with a literary prison. Chen Pinggan was indeed good at playing dumb. He only said, "I have plans to establish a sect in Tongyi continent. It may be a bit to the north, but in the future, it will be on the same continent as the Yarrow family of Da Quan. We will definitely have frequent contact." The old man was confused. "You've already established a sect. Why not in your hometown, Baoping continent? Is it because you can't get along there? That's not right. Since it's already a sect, there is no reason to move to another continent to take root. Could it be that your mountain has enough military service, but unfortunately, your relationship with the Song clan is not good?" In the eyes of the old general, the fact that Chen Pinggan was able to create an immortal mansion with the word clan at such a young age was already a shocking feat. It was not inferior to his granddaughter's recent success in becoming an emperor. As for the idea of a sect, the old general just took it that he was old and deaf and had misheard. Chen Pinggan said helplessly, "Grandfather Yarrow, the location of the sect is Tongyi continent. The mountain in my hometown will be the mountain of the sect. There is no need to move." The old man was in high spirits and his dejection was swept away. He was very pleased, but he pretended to be angry and laughed. "Brat, who would have thought that the older you are, the more arrogant you become? What, are you trying to fool me with this nonsense? Seeing that Jinji is now the emperor, you want to take advantage of her? Back then, you looked down on the Yarrow family's daughter. Now, you finally have your eyes on a female emperor? Good, good, good. If that's the case, I won't have to worry about it. Jinji has a high standard. You are one of the few people of the same age who can catch her eye. However, things are different now. Jinji's ambition is much higher than before. She has seen many strange people and earth immortals. I reckon it will be much harder for you to succeed compared to before. That stubborn young consecrator will not let you succeed so easily. Xianji, what is that person's name? Xiao Yuan Ran of the Golden Peak Temple. He is one of the Earth Immortals in Tongyi continent who is most likely to reach the upper 5 realms. Yarrow Xianji laughed and replied loudly. But in my opinion, he is not a strong opponent for Mr. Chen. Chen Pinggan felt a headache coming on and decided to keep quiet. The old man had indeed spoken a lot today, so he had no choice but to close his eyes and rest. After a long silence, he opened his eyes again and slowly said, "Our Yarrow family has never been good at dealing with scholars, especially those in the officialdom. They have too many tricks up their sleeves. One person can clearly state the pros and cons of a sentence, but still be able to claim that they are right. That's why it's more difficult to deal with them. If it weren't for Shu Qingju, a group of martial artists, who could carry a saber to court, and old Duke Shen, who could help put in a few words, the Yarrow residents might not be guarded by the guards of the imperial court, but under house arrest." All of the officials and scholars who had lost their reputations and clean reputations in that battle had then luckily survived. Back then, they had successfully escaped into the borders of the capital to seek refuge. Now, They were unable to enter the core of the imperial court and important positions in the officialdom. These people would naturally oppose the matter of the Yarrow family taking control of the country. They would want to take the moral high ground and return the family name to the Liu family. It was inappropriate for a woman to rule the country. Chen Pinggan said, "Shu Qingju?" Yarrow Xianji nodded and said, "I know that he has a deep grudge against Mr. Chen, but I still want to say something for him. He has been in the court all these years and has taken responsibility." Shu Qingju, an old general who was close to 70 years old, carried a sword called Daqiao. Now, he was the top general of Daquan and had made great achievements in the war. Back then, Shu Qingju led all his direct troops to the border and fought and retreated with the Yarrow family's cavalry. They fought and retreated all the way and finally defended Mirage City. He won big in the gamble. He became one of the mainstays of the Daquan army after old General Yarrow. Back then, Shu Qingju was just a young general who had placed all his bets on the first prince. Together with Wang Qi from the academy, Shu Tong from the Caomu nunnery, and Jiao Shizhen, Duke of Shun, they had all participated in the dangerous hunt to kill Chen Pinggan. However, Shu Qingzhou's choice was extremely decisive. He did not hesitate to fall out with the first prince, Liu Tsong, to make a prompt decision to withdraw from the bet. In the end, he caused his family to sit on the bench for many years. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "The grudge is not small, but I have a good impression of Shu Qingju and old Duke Shen." Back then, Chen Pinggan had a deadly feud with two princes of Daquan. First, it was the third prince, Liu Maro, and then the first prince, Liu Tsong. Liu Tsong was the eldest son of the concubine of the old emperor of Daquan, Liu Zhen. There was a difference between the eldest son and the concubine. In the end, Emperor Liu Zhen chose the eldest son, who had a good reputation among the civil officials, to succeed the throne. As for the third prince, Liu Maro, he had long since turned to cultivation to seek immortality. He did not show up in the previous battle and only focused on studying Qing Ci and Green chapters in a small Taoist temple. However, Liu Tsong, who was the temporary regent in the chaos, did not manage to protect the Liu family. After the Battle of Tongye Continent, Liu Tsong launched a mutiny in the rainy night and tried to seize the imperial jade seal from the empress, Yarrow Jinji. However, he was secretly worshipped by a person nicknamed the Grinder. Together with a short girl who was eating supper behind a pillar, they stopped Liu Tsong and failed to succeed. It was said that after the disheveled king was dragged out of the hall by the soldiers, he was extremely depressed. He laughed and cursed at the rain. "If I had known, I would have waited for the rain to stop. How forgetful. Just wait and see. Be careful that Daquan will be surnamed Chen in the future." Chen Pinggan had been carefully observing the circulation of the old general's qi and meridians. It was better than he had expected. Although it was just the last radiance of the setting sun, there seemed to be some subtle changes in the Great Spring State. Chen Pinggan roughly deduced that either there was something similar to the natal lamp in the imperial palace, or someone in the imperial astronomer secretly violated the rules of the Confucian temple by adding oil to the lamp. The oil added by the lamp could not be obtained by any immortal master or the gods of mountains and rivers because it was the illusory fate of the Great Spring State. Did Yarrow Jinji do something in the old land of the Yarrow family at the border that was enough to continue the dynasty? For example, he successfully expanded the border of Daquan and finally negotiated the ownership of Pine Needle Lake with the North Jin Kingdom. The entire Pine Needle Lake was incorporated into Daquan's mountains and rivers. The woman with the saber gently pushed the door open. The old man said, "I'm a little tired. I'll take a nap. But I think I can still wake up. It's not like before, when I closed my eyes, I lost the confidence to open them." Yarrow Lingji carefully helped his grandfather up and let him lie down to rest. Chen Pinggan did not leave the house immediately. Instead, Yarrow Xianji pulled her sister away first. The two of them stood in the corridor outside and whispered. Yarrow Lingji said, "Master was very strange. He asked me directly if the person's surname was Chen. Is he an old acquaintance of child Chen?" Yarrow Lingji's martial arts master was the chief of Daquan, the sharpener from Lotus Flower Blessed Land, Liu Zong. However, this sharpener did not reveal his identity. He did not even mention his hometown to Yarou Lingji. Yarou Xianji was a little absent-minded. He suddenly asked a question. His Majesty is not a daoist cultivator. Why did his appearance change so little after so many years? Mr. Chen is a sword immortal. How did he change so much? Yarou Lingji suppressed his anger. Your Majesty, it's fine if it's elsewhere, but in your own home, can you not be so distant? Do you know how sad Sister Jinji is every time she sees you purposely following the etiquette of a ruler and calling him your Majesty? Yarou Xianji's expression was indifferent. I'm already an emperor. What's a little sadness? Yarou Lingji lowered his voice, but the anger on his face increased. He said angrily, isn't it just the morning court fight outside the palace? How long are you going to blame sister before you can let it go? You're a disciple of the Yarou family. Can't you consider the overall situation of the imperial court? Don't you know how difficult it is to be fair to everyone? If sister really does things fairly, no matter how impartial she is, in the eyes of others, she will only be biased towards the Yarou family. Do you think it's so easy to be an emperor? Believe it or not, if Jinji is only the empress, not to mention you, even your fellow officials will be extremely biased by the imperial court. Moreover, Jinji has hinted to you many times in private to wait patiently and suffer some grievances first, because many of the present debts will be made up for in the long run. Think about it carefully. In order to carefully balance the imperial court, how many of the Yarou family's direct descendants and allies in the imperial court will fail to be selected among the 24 meritorious services? Don't tell me that you, Yarou Xianji, have suffered grievances. Yarou Xianji crossed his arms. It's difficult for an upright official to settle a family dispute. Moreover, we're already an emperor's family. I understand the logic. If I didn't consider the overall situation, I would have long left the capital. It wouldn't be an eyesore to anyone. Otherwise, do you think I care about the identity of a commandery prince and the position of a magistrate in the capital? According to the laws of Daquan, a commandery prince and a duke were both secondary first rank. Now, other than the Dukshan residence that once stood out in Daquan, there were already 8 duke residences. There were civil and military officials, and Great General Shu Qingju was one of them. Yarou Xianji was so angry that she punched her younger brother's shoulder. You're just an unreasonable fool who only cares about your own feelings. Yarou Xianji's body swayed from the punch, and a section of his sleeve fluttered lightly. Yarou Lingji's eyes reddened. She wanted to say a few gentle words to her younger brother, but she was afraid that if she said it, Yarou Xianji would be even more willful. For a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. The woman who once did not hesitate to draw her sword against a king could only turn her head away and focus on wiping her tears. Dressed in a green robe, he gently opened and closed the door, and walked into the corridor. Yarou Lingji hurriedly collected her emotions and said to Chen Pinggan, "Young Master Chen, here in the capital, no one will recklessly investigate your identity. Today, they will treat it as if nothing happened. However, someone will secretly send a flying sword message to the south. I really can't stop this." Chen Pinggan thanked her, then smiled at Yarou Xianji. "You should go to the border and drink the northwest wind. Indeed, you're not suitable to be a smooth and slick magistrate in the capital." Yarou Xianji's eyes lit up. "Mr. Chen, you mentioned it to grandfather? Your words are the most effective. You don't even need to be a military general who controls an army. I really don't have that ability. Just casually reward me with a scout captain or a secondary 6th rank military official. It's enough to send me away." Chen Pinggan smiled. "No problem, of course I can help. However, the premise is that you really understand the principles that your sister told you just now. Only then can I let you go to the border to feed the horses. Otherwise, if something happens in the capital in the future, just the slightest movement of the wind and grass, you will only act on impulse. You think you're a scout captain, but in the eyes of others? I reckon that with just a few words of provocation, and some fellow brothers in the army have been wronged in the officialdom, you'll probably dare to lead a few hundred elite cavalrymen all the way to Mirage City. If I were His Majesty the Emperor, it would be the easiest for you to be the Taiping commandery prince behind closed doors. Who cares if you can still stand up for those brothers who have retired from the battlefield? Fighting outside the palace gate in the Imperial Assembly? How many civil officials did you kick over? Tell me about it. TSK, good fellow. Do you think you're a martial artist who is invincible under the mountains of a continent, or a fifth-level immortal master on the peak of the mountains who knows how to cast spells? You're young and ignorant. You're impulsive, aren't you? Didn't you learn all this from Mr. Chen? When you encounter injustice, you don't care if it's there or not, you should just punch first. Yarou Xianji was rather dejected at first, but the more he listened, the happier he became. He chuckled and said, Mr. Chen, you didn't see that scene. If it weren't for Shu Qingju who stopped me, I would have been able to overturn all of those weak civil officials on my own. Now, I don't have such a chance anymore. I can't even scold or hit a minister-councillor of the Ministry of Revenue, let alone an assistant minister. He's very precious. If I had known, I would have kicked a few more when it was dark. Yarou Lingji listened helplessly, but he breathed a sigh of relief. In any case, with Child Chen around, this younger brother of his would not say those sarcastic words that would only make those close to him feel sad. Chen Pinggan stretched out his hand and shook the lame man's empty sleeve. Instead of comforting him, he teased, It's a good thing that you're the prefectural magistrate and didn't roam Jianghu alone. Otherwise, you'd be known as the one-armed divine fist for being a fifth-tier martial arts grandmaster. What's going on? Were you attacked by a demon of the upper 5 levels? If not, then don't talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. Yarou Lingji carefully glanced at his younger brother. Unexpectedly, not only did Yarou Xianji not feel uncomfortable, he said with a proud face, on the battlefield, it was dangerous after dangerous. It was a demon beast of the earth immortal realm, a sword cultivator. It hid here and there and attacked me sneakily. A sword light flashed past. Good fellow, I didn't feel any pain at first. Chen Pinggan looked at the woman with the saber. Yarou Lingji smiled, don't listen to his nonsense. In the chaos, I don't know how someone chopped off my arm. However, there was indeed a demon sword immortal near the immortal realm. His sword was sharp and there were many sword lights. Chen Pinggan nodded, then let's just say it was chopped off by a sword immortal. Otherwise, there won't be anything to brag about. Yarou Xianji's face was full of anticipation. He asked softly, Mr. Chen, the war in your hometown was even more ruthless. I heard that they fought from Old Dragon City all the way to the capital of Central Dali. Did you meet any real demons on the battlefield? Chen Pinggan thought for a while, then answered with a smile, I met a few. I fought with some of them, but there were some that were neither close nor far. It could only be said that I met them face to face. Yarou Xianji continued, Mr. Chen, I'm talking about demons of the upper 5 levels. How many are there? Can you count them with one hand? If you don't, my admiration for Mr. Chen would be reduced by half. Chen Pinggan patted the man's shoulder, smiled and said, Don't talk to people like that anymore. The man with a face full of sideburns laughed. Yarou Xianji unknowingly started to walk with a limp. He no longer covered himself, and one of his sleeves fluttered in the wind. Yarou Lingji laughed as well. Since the war, she had not seen her brother smile so brightly for many years. Yarou Xianji actually understood some things. It was just that he did not want to understand them. It was as if he could do something even if he was insensible. Once he became sensible, he could not do anything. Therefore, no matter what Yarou Jinji, who was already the emperor, said to him, or Yarou Lingji, who he had always regarded as his sister, said to him, Yarou Xianji would not listen. Otherwise, he would feel even worse. The three of them left the courtyard and returned to Yarou Xianji's residence. Yarou Lingji hesitated for a while, then said to Chen Pinggan, Young Master Chen, I have a master who has been a consecrator in Great Spring's capital for many years. He is a martial arts grandmaster. He seemed to have seen your figure earlier, so he immediately rushed over and asked if the guest's surname was Chen. I did not answer, but my master might have noticed something, so he asked me to pass on a message. He said that he knows Mr. Zhong. Back then, he even fought against Sword Immortal Yu together with Mr. Zhong. Chen Pinggan nodded and said, I am indeed old acquaintances with Miss Yarou's master. If there is nothing taboo in the residence, I can be a little more arrogant and ask him to come over to the Yarrow residence to catch up. Yarrow Lingji said, then I will call my master over. Chen Pinggan asked, is the buried river goddess in the aquamarine palace now? Yarrow Xianji smiled and said, no. Our water goddess golden body is mostly shattered. She says that she is too ashamed to be the water goddess, but she refuses to go to the aquamarine palace. She stays in the sword room in Qintianjian every day and doesn't go anywhere. She is waiting for a reply from the Confucian temple, saying that she knows the sage of literature. She has even met sword immortal Zhuo and a disciple of the sage of literature. Therefore, she wants to try sending a letter to the respectable, scholarly, approachable, and amiable sage of literature. She wants to see if he can help her and ask the immortals on the mountain for a better life-saving elixir for old General Yao. This is because she knows that the elixir from the underwater residence in the aquamarine palace is useless and cannot help His Majesty and my grandfather. Yarrow Xianji hurriedly said, I did not say those praises for the sage of literature. After drinking with her, the water goddess bent her fingers and burped. She said it with an extremely serious expression. However, I don't really believe it. I think the water goddess has never seen the three people from the sage of literature's lineage. She was just bragging to me when she was drunk. Although sword immortal Zhuo was once in the Tongya continent, why would he take the initiative to visit the aquamarine palace and meet our water goddess? This doesn't make sense. Chen Pinggan stood up and said to Yarrow Lingji, who had not gone far, may I trouble Miss Yarrow to greet the water goddess again? Just say that I am Chen Pinggan. Yarrow Lingji left to deliver the letter. Chen Pinggan asked Yarrow Xianji about the details of the Battle of the Great Spring. Liu Zong soon came to visit. The old man should not have left the Yarrow manor too far. Chen Pinggan stood up and clasped his fists. Senior Liu. Yarrow Xianji stood up and clenched her fist to lightly knock on her chest. Greetings, Abbot Liu. The sharpener, Liu Zong, nodded at the sloppy man. Then, he rubbed his chin and looked at Chen Pinggan in a daze. He sighed. Young Master Chen is becoming more and more handsome like an immortal. It's easy for me to think of myself in the past. Yarrow Xianji was confused. It seemed that Mr. Chen had an extremely good relationship with Abbot Liu. The three of them sat down. After a few words, a short woman hurriedly flew over and landed in the courtyard. Her eyes widened. After confirming Chen Pinggan's identity, she stamped her foot. The water flower wine and eel noodles are gone. What do we do? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,